Vashko, welcome to the Metagame.
Daniel, thank you so much.
Oh,
Sorry,
man.
I'm crying.
No, it's okay.
It can't be taken seriously. I feel like now it's its own mini game of like how long it would take to get through the fucking introduction. Good luck for post, by the way.
Yeah, no, we'll my editor will figure this out.
Yeah.
Dude, I've been wanting to interview you for a very long time.
Yes,
You go by Guy on Twitter.
that's right.
You used to go by Rival Voices,
Also correct.
but your real name is Vashko.
Yes.
And you've been doing this Anon thing for a while, posting a lot of insights and stuff. So
Mhm.
why are you face doxing right now?
Well, first of all, you're my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and we're in the same town. And you know, what other time would be more auspicious than this one to do it? And then the other reason is that, and now speaking seriously for just a second, and I promise I'll go back. I think the evolution from Rival Voices in the Ugandan Knuckles profile picture to Guy with like a human cartoon profile picture
Mm-hmm.
to now this, you know, my real face, my real name, actually traces a history of my own ability to stand behind my own thoughts, right?
Mm.
The story starts just that 5-ish years ago, my mind kind of broke. Lots of mental content, lots of stuff I felt the need to work out through. And I was, and mostly by writing it down on notebooks. I had tens of notebooks. I would write down every thought, basically. And there just was a moment where it felt importantly different, that these same thoughts were somewhere where plausibly someone might see them. Even if no one would, just plausibly someone could see them. And so instead of, you know, just writing in my little notebook, I started posting them on Twitter. And originally as this character, and I felt super scared, to be honest. I felt like, you know, people would hate me and I would be somehow ostracized from society and so on.
Even with the anonymous profile?
Yeah. Even with the anonymous layer, like it was terrifying. Like clicking post or tweet at the time each time was absolutely terrifying. But I did it, and to my great surprise, lots of people hated it, but that part was not the surprising part. So the surprising part is a few people were into it, right?
Yeah.
Like they were really into it. I don't know if you know that 4chan green text of like, you know, back in the day, you tell your friends you want to fuck a toaster and they're like, stop being an idiot, right? And now on internet days, it's like you tell the same thing and you go on Reddit and you find the you know, toaster fucker subreddit and all of these people validate you. So I hope that's not what happened. But what happened is that there was in fact this small contingent of people who were into my ideas, who like wanted to talk more, and eventually even wanted to meet the person behind those ideas that I was feeling the need to distance, you know, me, myself, this person that you're talking to from. And that was very surprising. And so it kind of, you know, traces that history or that evolution.
Yeah, I remember when you first told me this, I saw it almost as shadow work, where basically the parts of yourself that you thought people wouldn't accept, you found a way to express little by little, incrementally, tweet by tweet. And then eventually you got some kind of feedback for it that allowed you to integrate it.
Yeah. I think it's, I didn't think of it like that at the time.
Yeah.
Looking backwards, as I see myself going from this Ugandan Knuckles to cartoon character of a human who's called Guy, just an indescript guy, to now real name, real face, not just in personal one-on-one or group encounters, but to the internet. So again, you know, where plausibly people might see it,
Right.
just feels meaningfully very different.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the ultimate step in a way.
Yeah, this is me, you know, stepping back into the arena, or like moving into the light after having been in the shadows, or like returning to the village after having gone to the underground to fight the monsters or whatever. Yeah, this is the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You tweet a lot.
True.
Like, you know, I've spent time with you and you have insights and you just fire them off like constantly. It seems like it's something that's very easy for you.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people that have a lot to say, but they simply like just can't. They like the step, the fear, or the courage involved in putting their ideas out there is like too much for them to overcome. Why do you think you're so different?
I didn't feel like I had a choice. When I first started doing the, you know, rival Ugandan Knuckles thing, I was just accursed. Really, I think that's the word, by way too many thoughts. It was just, my worldview had recently broke or split into pieces. And it felt that the only way to put it back together was to write extensively all of these things that were coming to my mind. Like I couldn't have done otherwise, or I would just be stopped all the time. I remember having conversations with people, or like meeting a person from Twitter once, and every 3 minutes or so I'd be like, oh, sorry, I have to write something, right? And I would like fire off the tweet.
Yeah.
And so I was socially disabled, actually, right, in a meaningful sense. But it felt like it was the only way, like I had to push through, like the only way out was through. And it worked. As you probably know, I tweet way less now, probably down from 100 tweets a day to 50, which in comparison seems much more reasonable, even if not in absolute terms.
It's funny, I just remembered the first time I met you in person was in Lisbon a few years ago. And once I realized who you were on Twitter, I was like, oh, that guy? I've followed and unfollowed you like 7 times.
Right.
And I actually think that is an indication that you're doing it right. Because as I've gotten to know you more, you have like almost like a philosophy about this, where there's an authenticity to the way, it's almost like your notes app. And so you're someone who's built up a following and lost a following just by virtue of being yourself, basically. Yeah. And I don't know, I respect that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And yeah, it's very much my notes app, right? I have a thought, I throw it out there. Yeah. And it's like this Talebian idea of the convex bets, where I know the cost of throwing it is like whatever minute it cost me. I don't know what can come from it. One of the things that came is our friendship, right? Like to a first approximation. And so it has worked out. And I do also very much have a philosophy that you just have a lot of sludge in your mind and you have a few diamonds. And the way that you're going to get to the diamonds is by like digging through the sludge. Yeah. I totally get that people don't want to expose themselves to that. At the same time, for all the people that have muted me from 3 years back or whatever, but that are still polite enough to be mutuals, I would make this appeal to try again, because I tweet so much less. So it will be a much more pleasant timeline experience.
And then following your journey, your ideas are also a lot more refined.
Yeah. So I think they've built up into something decent. Yeah.
So I have to ask, you said this twice now, but you said it all started because you broke your mind at some point. What happened?
Sure. Here's my life history. Let's do it. Here's my life history. So my life history is, when I'm young, I am socially incompetent for reasons that are not apparent to me. I also happen to be skinny, and I somehow, back in whenever, 20 years ago, I chanced upon the belief that these things are related, right? And it's like, oh, it's bad and things don't work with girls, whatever, because I'm skinny. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to solve that. And so at 15, I start training weightlifting. And at 17, I'm national junior weightlifting champion. So like I got big. At 21, I trained so much, I gave myself a deep vein thrombosis. And, it was a bad time. I was in Brazil at the time for my study exchange, had to be flown back, like, very traumatic time, whatever. Most traumatic part, doctor says you can't work out for 6 months. And that was who I was, right? That was my personality, my being, myself, my identity, my ego, whatever you want to call it. And so very rationally for me at the time, I thought, okay, cool, I can't work the body, I'll work the mind. And so I go online, right? Sort of kind of like first and last mistake, but go online and find out about LessWrong. LessWrong, the rationalists. Raising the sanity waterline to save the world so that people understand how perilous the situation we are in, all of this. That eventually leads me to SF, and specifically leads me to Leverage Research, who was this very ambitious research organization that was very focused on, massively improving the world through very heterodox methods. And it just so happens to be the case that when you are exploring at the edges of science, lots of things might happen that you're not necessarily prepared for. And that experience was difficult for me in a variety of ways, or challenging. And then things just piled up. So like when, I was in SF, I was living mostly with the people I worked with. They were my friends. At some point it was just too much. I came back home, lost my job, lost my friends, my relationship also ended. I moved back in with my parents for the first time, having left home first at 21, moved back in at 28 or something. It just broke my worldview in a very meaningful sense. And then I spent the next 5 years putting it back together, which is the process that you partially and other people have witnessed on Twitter.
Yeah, yeah. And so part of that had to do with the nature of the activities at Leverage, which were kind of like, you know,
we are 100% getting this part, but please go on.
Yeah, we don't have to go too into it if you don't want to, but every time I'm in SF, people reference Leverage and the effects that it's had. And I always hear little pieces of the story. My mental image of it is something like, it's like a Thiel-funded think tank that was doing like frontier psychology with a bunch of really smart people, and then they were doing experiments on themselves, basically. And so that blew up in ways that, you know, we don't have to get into, and probably affected your world model, the way you thought about yourself, etc. But then materially, your life also blew up because you lost all your friends. You had to move back to Portugal. You had to move back with your parents, etc., etc. And then you started to pull yourself up from the underworld, tweet by tweet.
So it was all of that, and precisely as you said, like kind of doing research at the frontier of psychology with lots of self and other experimentation, which, you know, has all sorts of downside risks. And it's not that, you know, anyone was particularly irresponsible. It's just a hazardous research area, and then all of the material stuff that we talked about, plus COVID. And then eventually, you know, staying in the same home alone for 2 years. So all of this piled up together into a cocktail of near madness, you could say. But now I am, you know, normal and well adjusted, as you can testify to. So it worked out. Actually, it all worked out.
Yeah, it all worked out. There's something that I've always admired about you, which is, as I've gotten to know you more, you bring a fuck ton of intensity to every problem that presents itself. So in your story, when you're like, oh, like I'm not as socially integrated as I'd like to be, I'm skinny, you become like a weightlifting champion because you go like 110% on it until you have a deep vein thrombosis. You do the same with your intellectual life. Like you take your thoughts really seriously. You try to create a world model that is like 100% coherent, and you, every time you find some contradictions, you like obsess about it and like update it. I know a few other stories like this. Like, you've had phases of your life where you've gotten extremely skilled at something. You wrote a book recently where that was like all you did for 3 months straight. This is an admirable trait. I also think it causes you some amount of suffering, as you described. I wonder if you can explain from the inside what it's like to be so dogged and hyperfixated on things.
I think it probably all comes from the weightlifting back in the day, because that was the first time I saw that my effort was in some way highly correlated to my transformation, right? It's just like, you go there, you know, initially 3 times a week, and then eventually 14 times a week at some point, right? And you just keep going, and the weight on the bar keeps lifting, and you change in the mirror, and how people treat you changes, and all of these things start changing. And it just, I think, imprinted on me this idea that if you just give it your all, it will come back to you. And then there's ways in which it differs from other areas. For example, the intellectual area that you were speaking about, I think it's different because things compound in a very different way, where it's not like, you know, the strongest guy in the world is deadlifting 500 kilos or something, right? He's not deadlifting 5 million. But I think in terms of intellectual prowess, like the top people are just like orders and orders and orders of magnitude ahead of the medium people. And it's just because ideas compound in a very, very different way. But back to your question, it was absolutely the weightlifting. And it's like, oh, like, you know, if I put effort, I can literally go from skinny to like strong and big, and, you know, I have different reactions, and at least my girl problems are partially solved for now. And then I think I just carry that out through life. Yeah.
You've done this with a few other things. I don't know how much you're willing to speak about, but I know you did this with dance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. So at some point, I always liked it. I like to do it. It's a big thing in Portugal. And especially in the summer, they have a great setup going on. Always go out dancing. I wanted to get good at it. And at some point, I just decided to do it 5 hours a day 5 days a week because that's when the dance school was open. And I just did it. And I did that for like, I don't know, like 6 months or something. And again, it worked. I think people do things reasonably. And I think that's generally a bad strategy. For example, just back to weightlifting because it makes an easier point, but also works with dance. If you go really like balls to the wall for a year, let's say, even if then like you chill out, it's way easier to go back to the level of fitness that you were at, and like going back to your previous muscle level is way easier than getting it the first time. And so it's just kind of this thing that you keep for life. And then dancing the same. Like you can like reasonably dance and reasonably improve over time, or you can be really serious about it for a short amount of time, and then you'll just always have it. Right. And also the sooner you have it, the sooner you get gains from it. Right. Like you just like front load the effort, and then you keep reaping benefits from this, and you do this in a bunch of areas. And for a bunch of areas, you don't know how they will relate, but sometimes, you get analogies from one thing to the other, or you get weird influences like the way that the weightlifting attitude ended up influencing the intellectual life and so on. Right. So you pay those costs up front and you reap benefits for the rest of the time.
Yeah. So do things serial.
Yeah.
Or
not parallel.
Not parallel. Yeah.
Exactly.
Do things serial, not parallel.
Yeah. And do them, really seriously, balls to the wall for a while.
Yeah.
Also like, discover your limits, discover the limits of the activity, discover how hard you can go, like get to know yourself, and then, get many things I think have this sort of like S-curve in their rewards, or like people talk about the 80-20 or whatever, right? Or in meditation, Daniel Ingram, another area, meditation, says that he prefers people to meditate very little per day and just do like retreats every chance that they get, rather than do like half an hour each day, because he sees it as you're pushing a boulder uphill, and once it goes to the other side, then it just rolls down and you don't have to put any effort. And I think many things work exactly like that.
Right.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something Jordan Peterson said when talking about like all his nutritional stuff. He did carnivore, right? And he's like, I can do anything for 30 days.
Yes.
If someone's never done, balls to the wall, 6 months of 5 hours a day of dance or something like that, that just seems like a crazy thing that their personality has nothing to do with. But if you can get yourself to do something for 30 days, then maybe you can do that twice. Maybe you do that 3 times, and the next thing you know, you've front loaded something.
Sure. And it's also like, I think people don't have the model of how disproportionate the returns are when you do it in this way.
Yeah.
And so having done it even just once or twice or 3 times in different fields, you get a much better sense of like, oh, this is how far I actually can go if I invest this much upfront.
Yeah.
Which then motivates you to keep doing it because you've seen the returns before.
Yeah. That's actually a very optimistic idea.
I'm an optimistic guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned you did this with meditation.
Yes.
And you are perhaps my favorite dharma poster. And I've actually heard this from other people too. Recently, somebody in Toronto was saying that he actually likes you as a dharma poster compared to everybody else on Twitter because you don't do it in a way that's cringe.
Right.
It's like there's like a shit posting quality to it, which we can also talk about your philosophy of shit posting. But
sure.
I know you've like significantly reduced your suffering, even in the time I've known you. And maybe a good place to start is you were telling me last night actually that this year you made it to stream entry. And
people are gonna be mad at this. Yeah, sure.
You can say all your disclaimers or whatever, but and I quote, you said, I was like, how do you know? And you were like, it was undeniable. And so how did that happen, and how did you know it happened?
Sure. So the backstory, I guess, is that I have been playing around with meditation for better part of the past 12 years, so since 2013. Since you want to accuse me anyways, the context behind that is that I had, I was reading a book called The Motivation Hacker by Nick Winter.
I've also read that book.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Great book.
Yeah, great book. The story of the book is this guy that hacks his motivation to do various different tasks for I don't know how long. And then one of the things is lucid dreaming that he raves about because he dreams and he, he's a king and has sex with whoever he wants, like all of the things you could imagine, right? After reading that section, that very same night, I had my first but not last lucid dream where I was like, floating to my grandparents' house and like flying actually.
Just from reading the book.
Just from reading.
You didn't
just from
even
reading.
try anything.
No.
Yeah.
So I was napping because I was a uni student at the time, so I could just go home and nap. I read it. I had it. It was amazing. And I think at that moment I hit arising and passing away, which is this kind of like, you know, when the whole thing starts. And very soon after that, I felt this great interest and great pressure to meditate. I was like, yeah, I just need to sit. I need to sit every day. So that is kind of like the start of the journey.
Can you explain rising and passing away for people who don't know it?
There's various models or maps of Buddhism and the progress on the path. One of those has 12 stages that you go through. When you go through the 12 stages, at the end, you have what they call fruition or insight, which is when you kind of like, people are going to hate me, level up or whatever, right? And you can level up 4 times, which basically maps to being a human. Very early on, you got hyperpriors in the sense of like how you model your experience or how you interpret the sense data coming in.
Yeah.
And these both organize your experience, but also like are slightly off in a way that creates persistent prediction error.
Yeah.
That feels bad.
Yeah.
Right. That's like negative valence. And so just very simply, arising and passing away, if I'm not mistaken, is the 4th of the 12th. In one of the maps, there's like a million maps.
Yeah.
Everyone has their own map, whatever. But it's kind of like when you get going, right? Like once you've been to that one, when you restart the cycle, you always start from that one. You don't go through the other 3 before. And the other 3 are like mind and body, which is you starting to be able to say what is a mental experience versus what is a bodily experience, etc. So that's your rising and passing away. It just kind of like marks the moment that you're starting.
What's it like phenomenologically?
Well, it's a very interesting time, or it was for me. It's correlated with a bunch of things. It's correlated with extreme energy, extreme sexual desire, extreme charisma, and desire for spirituality or interest in it, or like somehow you get turned into that direction, right? You just start feeling attracted to it. Like you're vibing. Like it's an well, I can't say highly recommended because the path is difficult at some points, but yeah, it's a vibe. And again, it just marks this like kind of like transition into like now you're on it, like now you're doing it.
Yeah, the thing I'm trying to get at is you had this lucid dream experience.
Yeah.
What was it experientially that you're like, oh, this is now I'm on it? Like what?
Oh, I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
It took me a bunch of years and listening to actually a Daniel Ingram podcast with Spencer Greenberg. Where Spencer Greenberg was describing this experience that he had doing breathwork or something, where he saw like a white light and all of this, blah blah blah. And Daniel Ingram was like, "Oh yeah, you definitely that was it. Like you got it. That was arising and passing away." And so he was diagnosing him. And then when I heard him, and then I read a little bit and matched to my own past experience, I was like, "Oh, that's what happened." But for sure, I didn't know at the time, and very often I've only understood experiences looking backwards. Even saying I'm on the spiritual path. Like I don't really use that language very often.
Yeah.
And a lot of things needed to happen before I would even put things in those terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming back, you had that lucid dream experience from reading The Motivation Hacker.
Yeah.
You had this entry into the spiritual path.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So and then, get into it. As I said, I'm in uni. I'm meditating every day, a little bit before uni. Had an experience I didn't really understand at the time, where it felt that attention locked in on itself or something like this. I had no idea what happened. But for the next 12 years, I'm just a dilettante. Like every once in a while, I feel a pressure to do it. For 3 months, I'm doing it a little bit in the mornings. Then I'm not. At some point, I'm on Twitter and I was shitposting, and someone says, I think it was Undivided Ball of Bliss, who I thank, by the way, who says, you should do a retreat. You're overdue. And I was like, oh. Okay. And at the same time, Nika Murata kept talking about the jhanas. Journey was offering retreats on the jhanas, and there were all of these promises of like, you'll feel infinite bliss and you'll feel infinite love and infinite happiness and all of this. And I was like, sure, like whatever, like it's a week.
Even if there's like a 5% chance they're right. It's
sure,
like a no-brainer.
If there's only not infinite happiness, but like 500% happiness of whatever you felt, like it sounds great. Half infinite happiness sounds great to me, right? And so I did it, and at the time I was not not trying to progress on the path. I was not into it. I was not interested. I literally only went there for the infinite bliss. Like that's all that I was in for. And it mostly worked. I entered a bunch of jhanas on the journey retreat. It just straightforwardly worked for me. Your consciousness goes away. You're not there. You're just experiencing happiness, like the most happiness that you've experienced. It's fascinating experience. I recommend it. But on, I think it was 8 days or something, on the 7th day, I have this experience where I'm walking, I'm inside the house and I'm walking outside, and the door gave way to the street, so there's nothing above my head. And as I am walking outside, and so because I had been meditating with the journey people, I was quite aware of my experience. As I walk outside, I noticed that this happens in very, very short succession, so definitely under a second. My awareness expands, right? Because before there was the ceiling, I come out, it expands, and as it expands, a thought comes that puts it back like at the same level that it was inside. And the thought was something like triggering actually, or that would like grasp my attention. But in that moment, because I had been meditating so much, I was quite aware, and I was like, wait a second, like what was this? Like what just happened, right? Like what was this experience? As I do that, as I do that type kind of wanting to look at what happened, something shifts. I don't know at the time precisely what shifted, but I just felt that something shifted. My movement became very slow. I could not move very fast. Like I was experiencing motor retardation. The other type of retardation that I experienced. Yeah, right. Yeah. I knew you were going for that.
No, you got it.
And I'm walking around and doing the thing that I planned, but there's just something that feels very different. And as I get home, I realize that you're still laughing because of the retardation.
I'm excited what you're going to say.
So as I got home, I realized that this is how I described it at the time, and I think it's still how I would describe it. All my life, I have felt like there's almost two things or two kinds of things. There's one thing which is this, which is me, which is Vasco, and then there's all else, which is not me, right? And not only are they two different types of things, this thing that I am, Vasco, is primary. Like everything else is of the same kind, sort of, and is less important than me, or it's just not primary. Like I'm the main thing, right? And then there's everything else, and we are not the same. Like I'm not the same as this table. I'm not the same as you. Like you're kind of all the same to me in the sense.
There's a hierarchy in terms of perception.
Yes, or at least in the sense of being not me. There's me and not me.
Yeah.
And me is most important.
Yeah.
That was the default, and that was something I never noticed, but that was always implied or believed, or that colored my experience, etc. Now the shift that happened was that I experienced what is called the witness, where suddenly it felt like this and everything else were not two different kinds anymore. These were all the same. And instead of, experience starting from here, from my eyes, from my face, it started from slightly behind me.
Yeah.
And the main thing is actually like way up and to the back. And that's the main thing. That's the primary thing. And I'm just like part of the secondary thing of that, as with everything else.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so that experience, which felt like dying, to be honest, and we were still in the silent journey retreat, so I think I even wrote to my girlfriend a note saying, I think I'm dead, or I think I died, or like it just felt like, at least as the primary element of my own experience, I had died, right? So I was still in my own experience. I was just not primary anymore, or of some sort of metaphysical or ontological primacy. So yeah, that felt really bad. Because it felt like I had died, but I was still alive. Yeah, and that felt bad. And I had that song, how is it? Is row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. And I just had it play on loop in my head. For some, I don't know why, but it just came at that moment.
That's insane.
While I was like grieving myself. It was a very... it was a very weird experience. I talked after the retreat was over. with two meditation teachers about it, who both diagnose it as like, oh yeah, yeah, stream entry, like obviously, you know. And it's like, I don't know if you know that time knife meme. Do you know this? No, okay,
maybe not.
Yeah, I think it's just like there's some drugs where if you do them or do too much of them, you'll get into all sorts of time loops where you go back.
Yeah.
And the meme is just like, oh yeah, the time knife, like we've seen it, right? It's the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, you died while still alive. Yeah, classic.
Yeah.
You know, and so,
or like the machine elves.
Sure. Just like they were treating it as a very normal or uncomplicated aspect of experience, which I guess it is after you've been through it, but while you're in it, it just sucks, because this sort of like, primary presupposition or hyperprior, I guess, you have in the sense of how you organize experience gets lost.
Mm-hmm. In my own experience, the thing that I can kind of tie it closely to is the time I took way too many psychedelic mushrooms. Mm-hmm. It really felt like I died.
Yeah.
And there was that flattening out where I realized that basically it's almost like I deconstructed all the sense data that produced the concept of Daniel, and then created the distance between everything else.
Yeah.
And then that just became flattened out onto the movie screen. Yeah. And it's just, everything's just being projected onto the same movie screen.
Yeah.
And the way I made sense of that, like why it felt bad, was because I flickered in and out of it, not because it in itself felt bad. Like I think when it was happening, it was beautiful. Like the actual experience itself was just flow. Like there was nothing to feel bad about. But it was the self reasserting itself all of a sudden, and like this like grasping that came after, and then the days after when I just didn't know how to make any sense of anything.
Right.
It was almost like that Hyperprior came back, but I couldn't believe it anymore.
Exactly. It's still there, but you can't believe it because you've seen through it once, and so it becomes destabilized as you can't believe it in the same naive way anymore. Yeah. Like you've fallen from heaven or from paradise, right? You're exactly how it felt.
Yeah, I remember describing it as I peeked behind the curtain like too soon. Like I wasn't supposed to see that shit, you know, like maybe later in life, you know, after I've, you know, self-actualized in more basic ways.
Yes.
Yeah. It's extremely destabilizing.
Yeah. Familiar with.
Yeah. It seems like people want this though, right? Because, you know, there's people on Twitter talking about how to get into stream entry. Why would you want this if it feels so bad?
Yeah, I think a lot of people just suffer sort of like inordinate amounts for various reasons. And most of the people that I know that have gotten into meditation, and especially that have seriously gotten into meditation, was a kind of like either this works or I kill myself scenario.
Yeah.
Like it's like it's the last resort. It's like you've tried everything else. You've tried whatever. Getting girls, you've tried getting money, you've tried getting fit, you've tried having a good social life.
Getting really good at dance.
You've tried getting really good at dance. You've tried having a famous podcast. You've tried, right? You've tried all of this stuff. And there's still an element or various elements that make experience intolerable.
Yeah.
Especially in the West, when people quit absolutely. They're like, fine. You know, just fuck it. I'll do it. I'm up for it. Whatever. And then I think it's those people who then end up like making progress on the path, because it's like there's a fire lit up under their ass, and it's interesting in the sense that I do in fact at this moment just straightforwardly believe that the claims of the path are true. You will suffer way less. And there's this I don't know if you'd call it a metaphor or a parable, but that I like very much, which is, if a place is 10 minutes away, maybe you'll walk. But if it's 15 minutes away, maybe you'll take the car and then you'll get there in 5 minutes. So it's actually the people who have suffered a lot that usually find this method, and then that eventually suffer much, much less than anyone else.
Yeah.
But then this also does a weird selection effect where all the people who are finding Buddhism are outliers, are like a little bit, you know, crazy people with air quotes, in the sense that they were suffering like way more than like any normal person is like baseline suffering.
Were you one of these people suffering a lot?
I didn't know what kind of podcast I sent you for. Yes, straightforwardly yes. I remember somewhere in 2023 I actually had all my ducks in a row, so I had some money, happy relationship, family, relatively healthy, knew how to dance, former weightlifting champion,
Mm-hmm.
famous on Twitter, everything a man could ask for. And yet I woke up and I was still suffering. And I remember that day because that day I sat for 1 hour, so I meditated for 1 hour. And I did the same thing for the following 100 days, 30 or so days at 2 hours, and then like 5 days at 3, which is insane.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend.
You suffer less now.
That's true. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I suffer much less. It's incomparable. There's this Jungian quote where he says, "You could give me 80 years with the rockstar lifestyle of the women, the drugs, etc., or you could give me 1 day of life as I experience it now, and I would take that 1 day." Like, no doubt about it. When you read it the first time, it's like,
what a douchebag.
right? It's like, come on, guy. Like, it's like okay, okay, buddy. But actually, once you've been through 1 or 2 big shifts, and I've been through one with the stream entry, and I think I meet through another one right now, you just start noticing just how much of your experience previously just was suffering and how toned down it can be. And it's kind of unbelievable. I guess I had a little bit of a model because of you, actually, because you're a particularly, stoic, non-reactive person that, things don't really easily get under your skin. And that was like, oh, that's a way you can be nice, like this is cool. And so as I've grown in that direction, I'm like, yeah, Shinzen is just right. I suffer much less, and hopefully I'm the guy who took the car or took the jet, and I'll get there in a minute or whatever.
Yeah. Tell me more about how I reduced your suffering just by virtue of existing.
Oh, sure. So one of the greatest things that people do for other people that they're not even aware of is just being who they are, and specifically being how they are. Because I think people just assume they're normal and everyone is like them, right, in all ways. And I think this is not true. I think you in particular are particularly non-reactive, which I noticed and which I flagged as like a proof of possibility of a way that you can be. There's also another instance where you said that I take my thoughts so seriously.
Yes.
And I remember the first time you said that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wait, that's like a dial. Like you
don't have to do that.
You cannot do it. You can just like they can just come, and you're like, okay, and then you just keep living your life. And until you said that, I think I was not aware that that was a possibility, right? And I think it's like no one has a model, at least a comprehensive or exhaustive model of what other people's blind spots are, right? But just by being yourself, they can contrast the way that they are to the way that you are, and use you again with air quotes. To get sort of a model or a threshold for how they could be, or different ways of being, or what's possible. And I think that's very rich and very enlivening for others. It certainly helped me in this case.
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. I remember you once said you were describing like a jhana experience you had on the beach, and then this like woman was walking by. Yeah. And you had you were experiencing like infinite bliss behind your normal resting bliss face. Yeah. And you thought like from her perspective, she has no idea just how different this person, your interiority is compared to what you would expect for somebody sitting on the beach. Yeah. And use that as an example for, it's quite opaque to everybody how different someone's interior life is, emotional life is, like what the attractors are within their subjectivity.
Yeah, I think the range of phenomenology or of interphenomenological variation is very, very vast. Yeah. And I think people just have no idea, right? Like, and this is exactly the example, which is like, I'm literally experiencing infinite bliss right now. And there's no way that I was not showing it at least a little bit. Yeah. And this person just walked right through me. No idea. Yeah.
One of the implications of that, I think, is having a lot more patience for people who show up in non-standard ways. So if somebody does something unexpected or frustrating, or like you're like, why the fuck are they behaving like that?
Yeah.
This exact thought that you shared helped me expand my patience, because I have no idea what's going on.
Oh, so it goes both ways. It's not just
of course. Yeah. This is a mutual symbiotic
Gains from trade and specialization. I love it. Yeah.
I'll tell you something else I've learned from you.
Oh, please, let's make this the podcast. Yes.
Yeah. This is, we could do this for 4 hours. One of the first times we met, you told me, we talked about focusing. Gendlin's focusing.
Yeah.
And you, by talking about focusing, you gave a name to something that I already was witnessing you doing socially, which I thought was very impressive, where you would take your time searching for the right way to express something at the edge of your thinking.
Yeah.
And like straightforwardly, it translates to charisma. Like when you see somebody doing that, you're like, it draws you in. And we started talking, I don't know how we came across this, but you mentioned Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And how part of the reason why you think he was so successful in his like arc of like blowing up and becoming a culture war figure was that he was basically doing focusing on stage all the time.
Yes.
So maybe you can spell that out. Like, what is focusing? How is it the thing that Peterson was doing, the thing that you were doing? In a way, you do it when you're tweeting as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Back when that lucid dreaming, arising and passing away experience happened, I got super into meditation. I told you it draws you into spiritual practice. Got super into meditation. Got super into lucid dreaming, of course, because you can fly now and have sex with whomever. And then the third thing I super got into was actually focusing. So at the time, again, on LessWrong, they had this Gendlin's mantra or something like this, which is whatever is true already is so. Acknowledging doesn't make it worse. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. So, just own it. Like something like this. I'm screwing this up, so now I'm going to make both the Dharma bros mad and the rats.
Perfect.
It's fine. But so I investigated this guy and I heard about him, Eugene Gendlin, that had this book, Focusing. Eugene Gendlin, his story is he is a Austrian originally who emigrated to the US and then eventually became a psychology professor, I believe, at the University of Chicago. And when he was learning how to speak English, so he had his German and he was learning how to speak English, the professor noticed that he was young at the time, like 10, 12, like something like this, like very young, that he was, when he wanted to say chair or whatever, querying his brain for the German word and then trying to translate it. And the professor just said, oh, you don't need to do that. Like you can go like directly to the meaning, like to the wanting of saying the word and then try to say it in English from there without having to route through German. And this just led him on an investigation that lasted like 80 years and that I think is awesome, where basically the thing that he discovered is that there's this preconception or usual idea where you need symbols to think with, and he figured out that you don't, or his professor helped him. One great example of this is the tip of tongue phenomenon, right? Where you see someone, you know that you know their name, but you don't know what their name is, right? So you have a sense of it somehow, because if people give you different possibilities, like is it Jane?
You would reject
You're like, no, Jane doesn't fit this. But so then there's two separate things. There's the word, the symbol, the symbolization, and there's the direct felt sense, how he would call it, right? There's the direct meaning. And when you go, I didn't really understand, can you say that in a different way? Right? If you notice, the move that people do is they go somewhere inside themselves and then they bring out different words that symbolize the same thing. But so then the words and the thought, or I don't want to say the thought necessarily, but the words and the direct felt meaning that wants or needs to be expressed are not the same thing. So the symbol and the meaning are somewhat separate. Right? Because you can have very many different symbols mapping onto the same thing. Some fit better, some fit worse, some fit very precisely. So he discovers this. And then the coolest thing is he's studying, goes on to uni, studies psychology, and does a study with a bunch of therapy tapes. So they just, had a bunch of sessions, different methods, different people, etc., etc. And what he finds is what best correlates with positive outcomes at the end of therapy is how stilted the patient's speech was. Yeah. Right?
Like these disfluencies.
Exactly. Yeah. So how many times do they go, it's kind of like, no, that's not, that's, Well, it's sort of, and then, silences and so on. And the idea being that he theorized when people are speaking very fluently, they're kind of like, they have some story that they memorize and they're just giving you that story. But when they're actually connecting with what's presently true for them, that just takes time to put in words.
Yeah.
So from here, he discovers this thing that he calls the felt sense, this like direct embodied meaning or feeling of a situation, of a story. I have a bad feeling about this, right? There's this thing in my belly, like whatever, and you can put it in words, and there's knowledge there. There's something that you've noticed that you don't yet know consciously, but that you know at some level.
Yeah.
And that when you do put into words, when you do make conscious, there's this shift, this release, right? Which he calls the felt shift.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the felt sense, which is the meaning. There's the verbalizing it or putting it into symbols, and then there's the felt shift. And he thinks this is a cycle. So when you hear it in symbolized, so in this case with speech, it changes. It moves it forward.
And then you think Peterson was also doing that?
Yeah. I think the way that you see him, the thing I just did, right? I started a sentence.
Yeah.
I stopped. I looked down. I went inside.
Yeah.
Trying to get something out.
You do this all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm either doing that or I'm just joking around. Then I'm just saying random things and hopefully they're fun. But if I'm trying to say something serious or something I actually believe or to reflect my belief somehow, there's this process of stopping, going in, pulling it out. And when you see Peterson on stage, he very often, stops, looks down. There's this thing that, every guy who does a Peterson impression also does. There's this way in which it's kind of like this, but it's also like that, whatever. I'm not an impressions guy, but you are. And so, it very much seems to me like he's doing it, whether or not he knows it by name.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard not to do it if you're trying to speak at the edge of your beliefs.
Yeah. I think this connects to charisma. I think when people see somebody doing that, they get drawn in. What do you think is going on there?
I don't know. It's your theory.
All right. My theory is the same release that you're getting when you have a symbolic representation of the felt sense is happening at scale. Other
people get it too.
So if you do it on stage, then everyone in the room, it's like clicking and they get drawn in. If you do it in a conversation, that's what's happening. And then if you do it in tweet form, because often your tweets are like I think you once told me that the box for tweeting, like the 240 characters or whatever it is, it's just the perfect amount to have like a sentence to represent some complex felt sense. And then if you're doing that, some of the ones that go viral, it's like people are reading that and they're having the same thing happening with their own experience. Yeah,
I think when you're very honest about this, and this requires being very honest, right? Because you're putting words to this sort of like as yet unsymbolized sense, right? You just have a sense of something, and you can't pre-know really what it's about or what's coming out even. So there's an element of courage, right? You don't know the next step. And I believe Gendlin said that the most personal is the most widely shared.
Yeah.
And the way that I see it is when you dig deep into a felt sense, it's usually crisscrossing or pattern matching of various things, various experiences that you've had. And when you put it in very precise wording, you can imagine like a Venn diagram, like it's at the intersection of like whatever, 10 things. And maybe for the people who read it, they have only experienced 8 of those things. Like, one person has experienced some subset of those, and then another person, another subset, etc. Right? But they will then, whatever it did for you, it will also do for them, which is why I think when you tweet from there, very often you get the eat me, or I'm in this picture and I don't like it, etc. Like, so people clock in that you are talking about something that they feel, and not only they feel that they personally feel, and that's a very personal, not widely shared sense. And then you put in the words, and it's like, oh, this guy just put into words the thing that I like. What's going on, right? And because there's this idea that whatever is most personal is least shared, but he inverts it, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
most personal means actually more people will identify with it. And so when you tweet from there and when you speak from there, presumably in Peterson's case, people are like, he's putting words to how I feel. You said the thing that I thought but couldn't put into words, right?
Yeah.
Like how often do you see that?
Yeah.
I think this is part of what's happening.
It's funny because another way to say that is people feel seen.
Right.
And everybody wants to feel seen, or there's an epidemic of people who feel insufficiently seen. So
Sure.
if you give them a little bit of that, it means a lot.
Yeah.
And perhaps when you're doing focusing with yourself, you're allowing parts of yourself to feel seen. Like IFS parts or whatever.
Absolutely. 100%. Kind of my training grounds for this ended up being back when I was in Ljubljana doing another study exchange. At the time, you didn't need a license to work as a psychologist.
Yeah.
So I got a guy who was my therapist, who was actually a sociologist, not interested in therapy at all. He was like, I just want to roam your mind together. I was like, cool. And I was reading the focusing book. And so he ended up, he was just, there to go along for the journey, for the ride, right? So I was just like, there's this sense, whatever. And then maybe in conversation with friends in a group, you don't want to do those long pauses. You're afraid of missing the timing. You think people won't care, whatever. But here was a guy that for 1 hour, he's like, go, take as long as you need. And, and I'd be like, well, it's kind of like this, but kind of like that. And it's just like, again, that, front-loading training situation ended up happening, in this case, mostly by chance. The same way that you're relating to some of the things I'm presently saying. Once you put words to these things that happen to be very widely shared, people are like, oh, I see that. I feel that resonance. I feel like he feels how I feel. Like there's this mutual acknowledgement as human beings that are sharing some experience temporarily. It feels good.
Yeah. So you kind of use this guy as your training. Like he wasn't teaching you focusing at all.
No.
Yeah.
I used him. That's the word.
Yeah. You tend to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. If I were to make kind of the cartoonish argument, it's that to the extent that therapy is working based on that study, it's when the patient client is doing some sort of focusing type activity.
Yeah.
And then the therapeutic container has this unique property where the therapist is like, take as long as you need.
Sure. Yeah.
And so if people just did that with each other, if you just did that with your friends, or if you had a little bit more patience for your friends to communicate like this, then perhaps that would have like a dramatic effect on not only the people in the group, but the vibe as well, and how connected everybody feels.
Yeah, I don't know how much I want to stake a third claim that will make people mad. But I do remember last time I looked at research, it seemed to be the case that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like the modern, or at least was a few years ago, all the rage in psychology, ended up having more or less the same patient outcomes as psychodynamics, which is the Freudian stuff, right? And the received history of psychology is, we had Freud, but that was, the ancient times when we were still in darkness, etc., the dark ages of psychology. But now we are scientific and so on, right? But then you go measure the outcomes and they're the same. And also there's this huge replication crisis, right? Where if you take the 100 most cited studies in psychology and you memorize their results, you will be more ignorant than you were at the start because most of them didn't actually replicate, right? So you'll just learn a bunch of fake things. And so this whole story is in flux and it's being correctly evaluated, but it seems like the therapy style didn't matter that much, which would be additional evidence for this, like Gendlin's theory, which is what matters is like, are you actually, doing the work, and the doing the work is actually this process of looking inside. It's very plausible to me that if at the margin you had, more freedom, more affordances, etc., to do that, with your friends, with your family, it would just make things better in this sort of vague way, right? I don't want to commit to a particular thing, but for sure at the margin, I would be, I stand this idea.
Yeah. And just to add even more, like to sell it even more, I work with startup founders. One of the biggest things that comes up in their organizations is that at some point, especially when they hit a certain level of scale, people have points of view that differ and they have difficulty creating alignment. And that's like, all the problems are like downstream of that.
Right.
And the way to do that, the way to create alignment is, you can get better at articulating your case, but one thing that works so much better is before you express a point of view, you make the other person feel seen and heard. And Carl Rogers talked about this. I learned this from Peterson. It's like Rogerian listening is before you say anything, you summarize what the other person has said to their liking. And if you just practice that, it's a strict win. Like the one thing that makes it hard is you have to listen closely and you have to take your time. In the short term, it slows things down.
Right.
And it's much faster in the long term because people feel heard.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a little bit goes back to what we were saying about how difficult it is to model other people's experience.
Yeah.
Where if you don't have that, nugget or piece or insight or whatever, then you just see sort of like the top level or surface level behavior, and you think you can infer very directly to the motivations. Where I'm sure your experience is when people actually do this exercise of trying to summarize the other person's point of view, very often they fail to, at least when they're starting off, right? Because their model of like what's generating the visible behavior or visible action or the demand is actually not that good, and then it takes a while until you get to know the other person, and then it works, right? Like I would presume. And so I can totally imagine that being very useful.
This reminds me of one of my favorite concepts of yours, which I'm affectionately calling Vashko's knife, where in relationships, intimate relationships, when you're having an argument.
I don't want to coin it that way, but please go on.
I like it. It's like your girlfriend is upset about something that you did. She expresses it to you. That hurts. Yeah. So it's like she's stabbing you with a knife. Yeah. And then you're upset that she even would think to interpret your behavior in such a negative light. You're like, how could you think that I would do that? And you flip it back on her just because you're having bad feelings. And the knife is double-sided.
Yes.
And so you push it back out into her, and then she feels hurt by that. And then most arguments with people are just like, you're just stabbing each other back and forth with this double-sided knife.
Yeah, I think it's as if people happen to have two triggers that are symmetrical or something, right? And you don't want it in you. You don't necessarily want to stab the other person. You just don't want it here. It feels bad.
Yeah.
And then, but as you push it, you happen to stab the other person. They do the same, and it keeps going. And I think it's just like, things that aren't that way, people can solve, right? Because like, I said this, it hurt you. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean it, etc., etc. But when it's, I said this, it hurt you, and the way that you're expressing it hurts me, you just get into these loops. And so there's just going to be some sort of selection effect where things that are not of that kind get solved, and what remains is things that are of that kind.
Yes.
Right? And then there's either you're in some weird polykill situation, right, where there's a third person that can aid you, or maybe
couples
counselor, or you have a concept that allows you to be like, oh wait, maybe this is one of those, and then the other person also has to have it, or it's not going to work. Hopefully if both have it, you're like, okay, it seems like this is one of those things, maybe we should get advice from a third person, maybe we should disengage it, etc. But I think the difficult or like sort of like sticky relationship issues are very often of this kind. But please don't call it Vashko's knife.
It's a great name. And the way out is you take turns. A general rule is the person who brought it up, no matter how it makes you feel, you do everything you can to make them feel heard and seen. Because once they hit that threshold, now they have the capacity to hear and see you, and then you can say like, okay, cool, like that's good. It's like, well, when you said that, this is how it made me feel.
Right.
But what's happening is like two people want to be seen at once.
Yes.
And then that's what feels like very triggering. That's what makes people defensive, because the other person feels like, oh, you're not seeing me because you're hurt by the thing I said. And so I'm just going to dig my heels in even more. And then you just create a lot of conflict. Yeah.
I think you need to see, well, you can do whatever you want to. You can ignore everything that's being said. But I think it can help to see the relationship as a system. And it doesn't really matter where slack is coming from, but it will make everything smoother for everyone long term, for sure. And so if you can gain a little bit of slack by holding the reaction just for 1 extra second, 1 extra minute, 1 extra hour, that gives you the space to then be able to make the other person feel heard, then the same way that not Vashko's knife goes into a negative spiral, I think you can go into a positive spiral of increasing comprehension, etc., etc., and then of course, these stay in the shared memory of the relationship, which then, trigger further victory or positive spirals in the future, etc.
Yeah. Similar to that selection effect, there's like another level where the subset of Vashko's knife situations that stick around the longest are the ones that have to do with trauma, basically, or samskaras, or when somebody for some reason has like an 8 out of 10 emotional reaction to like a 2 out of 10 frustrating stimulus, and being aware that if you're intimate enough with someone for a long enough period of time, those are the problems that remain. Then gives you the language to not take a bunch of shit personally, because if your girlfriend is being overly reactive about something, and you can have this shared idea that, oh, she's in her trauma right now, then I'm like, great, like now I can attend to this, knowing that this is I'm dealing with some really sensitive material, and then there's going to be another time where I'm going to need that grace. So that's very helpful. And then another thing I learned from Joe Hudson is he had this series about fighting with your romantic partner and how to do it well. And he said one way to get out of this loop of like, they don't feel seen, you don't feel seen, and so you keep hurting each other trying to be seen, is you take a moment to see yourself. Let's say they say something to you that makes you feel like they're framing you as someone who's vicious, or selfish, or some negative trait.
As they do, yes.
But and you feel like what the fuck? So you want to defend yourself. You're like, that's not what happened at all. You misunderstood me. If you take a moment to be like, no, with yourself, like I have good intentions. It's like, yeah, I'm human, so maybe I didn't communicate as clearly as I would like to, but no, like my heart's in the right place, and you just acknowledge that with yourself, then that gives you a little bit more space to not be reactive. And I found that to be Slack. Yeah, I find that to be like directly practical.
Okay, so basically, instead of allowing the reflex reaction to come out, just take a beat. Is that true? Check in, and now you have like your own kind of like ground and place that you're communicating from.
Yeah, great summary.
Fast learners.
So this is great because I wanted to talk to you about reactivity.
Sure, let's go ahead.
Which is something I taught you to get better at, to be not so reactive.
Well, I would say inspired, but please.
90% of your success in this domain comes from just ambiently being around me, is what I heard. But whatever.
By telling yourself, please go on. Yes.
I was saying this to you last night. I've noticed this even in the time that I've known you, that there is a difference in the way that you deal with negative life events. Like some pretty serious stuff too. Yeah. You have way less reactivity when it comes to it. And even at the point where it's noticeable by other people. But I imagine it's quite noticeable for yourself, like coming back to how much less you're suffering now. Yeah. What's that like? And how did that happen? Was that just a natural consequence of stream entry, or was there some other inflection point where you started to create a little bit more space between the stimulus and response? Yeah.
Stream entry was sort of like ambient big deal. Like, just much less suffering arises. That's nice. I guess there has since been another inflection point where there's this story or saying that when the student is ready, the teacher or the master appears, right? And then in my experience, it's when the student doesn't even think that he's ready, the teacher appears in your Twitter DMs, convinces you to have you a call, wounds you about it, gives you a fake pretext as to why you're talking, and then like puts you in this training thing that you haven't necessarily consented to in any explicit way, but now you're in there, and so now that's what you're doing, I guess. And that was my experience. So basically, there's this guy on Twitter, on X, Michael plus Free Happiness, who seems to, apparently by all possible measures, have gotten pretty far on the path. He's taking a particular approach, which is going directly for the Fetters, which is another name for those sort of like hyperpriors that you can have, doing it less with meditation and more with phenomenological exercises. Spend 3 hours looking at an orange, and do you notice that blah, 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 like whatever, like stuff like this. And we had some call, and at the point I was experiencing some emotional difficulties, and he said something like, he has his own method, which is basically, notice your experience, notice how bad it is right now. How bad would it be compared to breaking your leg? Okay, now go back to it. Like, how bad is it really? And then just come back to the experience. Just like actually feel the sensations in your body. Like whether, and then you're going to put some label on it. Usually, fear, tension, stress, depression, grief, whatever, something that you usually would flee from. Continuously run through this exercise and come back and just feel it. Like that's it. That's it's very simple, at least in terms of the instruction. We had a few calls where he, about other stuff also, like we were just talking, then in the middle he would like, oh, by the way, what's your experience like right now? Okay. And then compared, interesting. Oh, can you just breathe for a second? And like I didn't ask for it. Like he kind of like pushed it on me a little bit, which is hilarious. But then one day, I don't know why, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like massive panic, like claustrophobia, like everything you can imagine. I don't know if, too much CO2. I don't know what caused it, but my experience was very uncomfortable. It was just very bad. Sort of like world closing in, awareness very tight, etc. And I start, it's 3 a.m. I don't want to wake up my girlfriend. I start pacing around the room. And then from one moment to another, it just drops. Like all of this anxiety, grief, claustrophobia, fear that felt, and at least until then was my experience. They come in waves, like they stay with you for a while, sometimes for very long, then they leave, etc. Just dropped, just went from like a very large parts of my experience to zero in a few seconds. Wow. This was very disorienting, right? I was like, like looking around, like, wait, where am I? Like, what the fuck? It's like that Petersonian idea, right? That sometimes when you find out that your girlfriend cheated on you or whatever, you thought you were in order, and suddenly you're like, oh no, I'm in chaos. Like the ground shifts from under you. And this was the same thing, but positively. Like you're in chaos, and you thought you were in chaos, but like no, now you're in order. Like things are actually quite fine. So that was super disorienting, and he associates it with the 4th and 5th feathers, which are weakening, ill will, and aversion. Will, and aversion just means sometimes you tag some sensation as good and you want to move towards it, you want it to stay fixed in place forever. I want to feel like this forever. Sometimes you tag it as bad, you push it away, you don't like it, etc. An interesting exercise is to discover how much of the sensations is just how you tag them. Right? Where the same heat that people go to the sauna to is the heat that maybe they'll escape at midday, right? Or like cold showers. And this I highly recommend. This is one I can highly recommend to people, which is to do cold showers and just very slowly turn the water lower and lower and try to notice their resistance coming up.
So start like lukewarm and then just
start lukewarm and just slowly go, like play around. And at some point you'll notice you tense up, like physically tense up against the predicted incoming sensations. But if you can drop it, and I learned this during a journey retreat, the second one I did, if you can drop that resistance, the sensation of the cold water goes from seemingly painful, which is why you're tensing against it, to basically orgasmic, very fast. And then you discover it's not the cold water. It was never the cold water. What felt bad was the tensing or the resistance against the incoming sensations. And what feels good is the letting go of that tensing and that resistance. But anyways, I had this experience with Michael, this time at 3 a.m. by myself, which was like, wait, what? And I think something changed hence on how I related to incoming, bad sensations or difficult sensations, where I would not tense in response to them, but I would relax the same way that I would not anymore tense in response to a cold shower, but I would relax. And what you find, or what I found in my experience, is that if you just don't tense, they come and go really quickly. They still hurt the same, so it still is as bad, but instead of lasting forever, it's like a very momentary thing. I discovered, unfortunately, that a lot of the suffering was actually just mental elaboration. So it's like someone cuts you off in traffic, right? And you're like, this fucking guy, like how are people this day, like this society is gone and blah, 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 and how can people do this? And this is so inconsiderate, right? And this can go on for hours. Like people can be mad, they can get out of the car, fight you, whatever. Like it can go on for very long. Or you can have this insane experience, which I've had and makes you look like a psycho, but also is true, which is, guy does something crazy, you almost die, and there's still I still have the instinctive like, fuck you, asshole, and then the very next second you're like, like you go completely back to normal. And so that has been my experience of dropping this sort of resistance to sensations, which makes everything feel way better, or at least makes it go from feeling bad to feeling normal really fast. And so you just gain all of this, again, slack, right? Because it's like you don't get stuck. You can just take many more hits during the day because it's just like gone.
The mental elaboration is enabled by thoughts.
It is thoughts.
It's thoughts, yeah. It's the fact that we have a stream of thoughts that can pull us in. Because you had a really great example of your dog.
Yeah.
Because the dog's not having these thoughts.
Yeah, so my dog, my inspiration, my spirit animal. So I have a dog, a small dog. He's like this. He's a pudengo português. He's a breed, how you would say. And one time I was walking him, and just walking him, whatever. And then I look back, and suddenly he's inside the mouth of this huge Shiba. Like, just happened from 1 second to the other, right? Like he's just there. And I'm like, what the hell is happening, right? And I fucking pry him open, take him out. My mom was there. She was screaming at the owner of the Shiba, like, how is this possible? How are you doing this, etc. I'm like, my heart is still racing. But I look at him, and he's like, la 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 la, like prancing again. And so his experience was, T1, he's prancing around. T2, he's inside the mouth of this monster, like compared to him. And then T3, he's prancing again. Like there was no like
residue.
Exactly. How could this happen to me? Am I safe? Blah blah. No, he's just like immediately went back to normal life. So in my case, the Shiba with the big mouth is the crazy driver that just put my life at risk. But it just this happened. This is the thing. Now we're back.
Yeah. So by having a discursive mind that can like think things, you now have the risk of mental elaboration. Yeah,
I think by naively and reflexively believing your own thoughts.
Yes.
Which ties back into what we talked about, which is, a thought comes that this guy is whatever, or this means whatever. And then that thought kind of pulls another thought, and now you're in the train, and then it just goes. The Buddhists actually have a term for this specific thing. They call it proliferation of concepts. Papananda, I think. I'm fucking...
No, I've heard something like this.
Yeah, but something like this, which is there is this trigger or this stimulus that triggers one thought, and then that just keeps going on forever. And then as you change your relationship to them, as you're like not necessarily more skeptical, but just not so naively buying into them, then they either arise and are almost immediately or reflexively dropped because they're recognized as very quickly as unwholesome or not leading anywhere useful, or they don't even arise. There's just like the thing happens, the painful or difficult sensation comes, drops, goes. That's it.
Yeah. I've also heard that you'll have stable ones, like you'll have like these little hot springs of like thought proliferations, and those are the samskaras. So people might have like 3 or 4 samskaras that have to do with basically very like fundamental aspects of their ego. Maybe related to trauma, maybe related to their identity, and they're just constantly generating thoughts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So there's like a few generators that like kind of like all comes from, and then if you can clean them out or whatever, like you clean out a lot of stuff. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
At the basic level, you learn a bit of mindfulness, and so you can do that move where you're like, wait a second, like those are just thoughts. Like the driver's gone now. Like, why am I still angry? Oh, it's because I'm looping on thoughts.
Yeah.
And meditation helps with that because you pay more attention to your experience, and so you can do that little mindful move of noticing, like making the thoughts an object in consciousness as opposed to being subject to them. So that's like level 1. And then you'll notice that, there's like a series of thoughts I tend to have all the time.
Right.
Like maybe it's a certain type of judgmental thing that shows up in social groups that you're like, I'm always feeling this way around these types of people or something like that.
Right.
And then if you follow all those, they might come back to like 3 or 4 generators, which are the samskaras. If you're able to like heal the samskaras,
right,
I feel like the final boss is the main generator, is like the hyperprior you were referring to earlier, like the sense of self to begin with.
Yes, I think that's correct. Although I have to preface this by saying I'm speaking way outside of my comfort zone, and mostly about my experience. But I do believe that in this Fetters model, where there's like 10 feathers or whatever that you need to do away with, that then get divided into groupings of 4, where each 4 is a path. So you have like first path, second path, third path, fourth path, and then you're done. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the very last one is ignorance. And I think ignorance is that residue of belief in a separate self. And then apparently people claim that once that's gone, then you're Gucci.
Yeah. So there's this question of like, what do you do with the samskaras?
Right.
And I think this is just my speculation.
Please.
I think
that's what we're here for.
This ties into the whole other side of inner work. So like in my mind, there's kind of like dharma, and then there's like feeling your feelings, and then these things interweave in some kind of way that is not fully coherent for everybody yet.
Sure.
I remember like talking to Tucker Peck about this, and he has the benefit of being a meditation teacher, but also he's a psychotherapist, and in his mind he kind of thinks of them as these two separate fields that you do practice in both, and they kind of like support each other. So there's different ways to think about it, but one thing that's been helpful for me is like why are these samskaras present to begin with? It's like the body keeps the score type stuff. It's Mike Johnson's latches. It's things that happened at a very young age when you didn't have a sufficient level of safety to process it in an uncomplicated way. So you clenched, you latched, you did whatever you needed to do to survive, and then you started to build a personality structure on top of that. And so they're very upstream of the way that you live your life. And like one way to think about this is a lot of people will make massive life decisions based on avoiding 2 or 3 emotions that they felt in a very acute way when they were too young to feel them. And they're like, I'm never fucking feeling that again. I love the phrase "feel your feelings" because it sounds kind of stupid. It's like, what do you mean? But one thing that's been helpful for me recently is when I was more on the outside of this stuff, I kind of didn't like people overemphasizing the validity of their emotional experiences because I felt like that's the opposite of what we need. We need people to mature and grow up and stop taking their emotions so seriously and stop taking things so personally. And not all your emotions are valid. Like I used to say, all your emotions are valid has done more harm than good. I don't know if I still believe that, but feel your feelings is not about being more emotional. It's about acknowledging a reality that is already there. It's about like aligning with reality. And I think this relates to focusing. I think it also is just one of these things that's very cultural and like socially conditioned. So one example I heard Joe Hudson say was, imagine you're in a cafe and there's somebody sitting next to you or sitting at the table near you. What sort of emotions could they spontaneously express that you would feel okay with versus not? So if someone's sitting there like, reading a book or something and they start sobbing, like it might be something that you attend to, but it's not gonna scare you or anything. But if they get angry, if all of a sudden they just start like swearing and like they express anger, everyone there is gonna feel super uncomfortable. Culturally, that's an emotion that we're not super comfortable with. So everyone's gonna have trapped anger basically. And then perhaps some of the samskaras are related to these emotions that culturally, like we just don't have as much literacy or fluidity with.
I see. So here's what I would say to that. So, okay, it's going to sound like pushback in the beginning, but I'm going to tie it and then we're going to be friends again by the end. The anger situation, I think, is meaningfully different. Well, the sobbing situation is already a little bit. The fact that someone is willing to take socially unconventional actions means that it's hard to predict them. Which means that they might actually be a threat. And then if they're taking seemingly violent, unconventional social actions,
or actions that we associate with violence,
then it makes sense to like get a little bit tense
for sure
and model them. Having said that, a lot of the things that you were saying, how you think validating emotions has done more harm than good, etc. There's this model by Ken Wilber that I like a lot, which is wake up, clean up, show up,
grow up.
There you go. Right. So like mature, get awakened, actually be there and do stuff for people, and clean up whatever emotional stuff you have to clean out. And I think a lot of these discussions are things that you can't discuss in abstract. right? So for lots of people, especially, Westerners who are in the sort of like, psychology, whatever space, I agree with you, like the or at least with previous you, that the validating their emotions is doing more harm than good at the margin, because there's been too much of that. For people who have grown in a very sort of like, suppressive, authoritarian kind of situation where they could never speak how they felt, they need the opposite message. I believe people are correctly modeling that this is a situation that needs sort of like larger error bounds around what can happen.
But isn't that downstream of the fact that we have a blind spot around anger?
How so?
If anger was just normal, like if anger was just a thing that would happen from time to time and it wasn't personal, like it's like a sigh, it's just a normal biological function and we're just used to it, and we have examples of people getting angry but not at us or not in a way that is violent, and it's just, you're a human being, you're going to get frustrated from time to time, then that wouldn't be outside of the norm anymore, and so you wouldn't model that person as a threat.
Oh, okay. Like in the scenario where you can get everyone on Earth in on this,
or everyone in a given culture,
and they get angry but don't take violent action as a response. They just like scream at you or something,
or they just scream on their own, not at you.
Okay. In that case it would make sense. I just think that in present culture,
absolutely.
The fact that not everyone is on that, actually makes sense that people are tense up.
It's the appropriate reaction in present culture to tense up.
Exactly.
I'm not implying that it's not, but it's just an indication. Like it's we give these emotions different, we put them in different categories basically, and then by the same token, people are much more likely to interpret anger as manipulation. Like if someone like raises their voice, it's like, oh, you're trying to overpower them and get them to do something, which is true. Like a lot of people do that, but they're much less likely to do that with sadness. And that's why sadness is actually a vector for manipulation that like goes unchecked all the time.
Sure.
So someone will just start crying, and then you're like, oh fuck, I gotta like attend to this right now. But if someone gets angry, you're like, I gotta defend myself. What the fuck? But sometimes people cry, and you gotta defend yourself from that.
Yes.
And so that's like the blind spot on the other side, basically.
There's going to probably be like a sort of like ongoing arms race, right? As to whatever people think is like the avenue that they believe is where they get the manipulation. Yeah.
Speaking of manipulation, one of the things that you've written a lot about is, this is a term that I like. I don't know if you would use a different one, but
yes, please. After Vasco's knife, everything is the field is open.
Adversarial epistemology. Which I can already intuit how this connects to your personal story in some ways, but basically you've articulated in various ways how the information landscape is often deliberately designed to dissociate people from their sense of reality, and how there's all sorts of incentive structures that encourage that. And I haven't read it yet, but this is, from what I can tell, the topic of your book. What got you interested in this in the first place? And is that an accurate accounting?
That's an accurate accounting. This ties back to the way that my worldview broke a few years ago, which was me realizing that the sorts of manipulations that we just talked about go really deep, and they go at the level of concepts and of words, right? Which, if you're not connected, and I love how we're tying everything in, if you're not connected with that like direct felt sense, then the only thing you have to think with are words and concepts that you got from the outside, right? And if those come laced in or created in a way that leads you to certain conclusions, or at least that makes certain conclusions cognitively costly to reach, then you can shepherd people in the direction that you want, while having them think it's their own thoughts and their own conclusion, which, of course, as a master manipulator, sorry, just pointed at you for no reason. You're obviously a beginner. No, just kidding. Is much more interesting than giving them a statement or a proposition, right? Because a statement or a proposition invites dispute. If you say X is Y, You're like, I don't know if X is Y, maybe X is not Y. But if you just give them a new concept, which is XY, right? And that's the thing that they're working with, it's harder. And I can give you 2 examples that pop to mind.
One popped to mind for me too.
Please, maybe it's the same.
Microaggression.
Yeah, precisely. So microaggression is a beautiful, if you're observing it from this sort of like
chef's kiss.
Exactly. If you're observing it from this sort of like creator or like a craftsman mindset of a adversarial epistemology and conceptual warfare, having the thought, are microaggressions aggressions? Right, is really hard. And it's really hard because it exploits this mistake that people do all the time, which is they confuse the label of a thing with a thing. Like you see this in politics all the time, right? You have the Institute for Good Things, and it's like, oh, is it possible that the Institute for Good Things is actually doing bad things? And it's like, it's hard to think the thought, right? And then if you just change names, it makes it much easier. Like if instead of saying, are microaggressions aggressions, which seems like a contradiction, right? It seems like it's tautological that they are. If you just say, are MAs as shorthand for microaggressions aggressions, then it's like, I don't know, like what's an MA? Can you give me an example of an MA? And then I'll judge, right? Then another example that I think is very fun is OpenAI, of course, which is famously not open, right? But that makes the thought thinking, wait, is OpenAI not open also seem like a contradiction in terms? And I think there's, once you start looking into this, I think there's a million examples of this kind, where you see how words, terms, etc. are crafted to lead your thinking in a certain way, or at least make a certain type of thinking very expensive, cognitively expensive. And the type of thinking that certain people don't want you to think, not you personally, but just in general, don't want public opinion or whatever to lead that way because it doesn't benefit them. Yeah.
In Canadian politics, we're like bipartisan, similar to the US, but it's conservatives and liberals. And so it's hard to conceive of the Liberal Party as not being liberal.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Something that you've seen in, whether it's being routed around or whether it's a new avenue of attack, I guess depends on your alignment, but in crypto, you've seen them calling what are de facto mainstream institutions legacy institutions, right? Like to lead your thinking away. You've seen how Trump uses fake news. You are fake news very actively. How he decries what he calls the mainstream media as opposed to just media. It used to be media. Now it's mainstream media, right? And they're somehow bad because to be an underdog is good. You have social justice. Is it possible that social justice is not justice? Is it possible that social justice is actually unjust, right? All sound like contradictions, but if you just put SJ instead to refer to the thing, right? If you use just a random label to then point to the thing, then it's an open question. So I don't know, maybe it is, maybe not. Like we would need to unpack it, right? And so, I think those are some other examples.
These are kind of like Psyop tools, but what would you call this whole approach to manipulation?
I think this in particular, I call it's just a conflation between labels and the things that they describe. So it's like deliberate conflation is how I call it. Like they're deliberately naming the thing, the word that they want you to think that the thing is, but the thing and the word are separate things. Like the same thing has very many different words in different languages, right? But they're tightening them up, gluing them together so that you think of it one way, so that you stand towards it one way, direct yourself towards it one way, direct resources towards or away from it a certain way, etc.
And we're talking about it with like that there's like a lot of agency and intent behind this. Spell that out a little bit. Is this just is this how it's always been? Different institutions are trying to gain more power, and memetic warfare is one way to do that. Is this more emergent? Is it a mixture?
This is not, at least to my knowledge, an existing field of study. It's necessarily an adversarial field of study because that's what's actually being studied. If you make your understanding of adversarial dynamics public, you lose whatever edge you have. So you can't make it public, which means there might be lots of research on this that I just don't know about. And I'm just like the idiotic guy that hasn't reached the point at which it becomes very obvious why you're not supposed to talk about this publicly. And so I still am. But so I don't, so to my knowledge, this hasn't really been investigated and it's not at least a public field of knowledge. although all sorts of things happen in politics, right? There's focus groups, there's getting people in a room, there's lots of people being paid a lot of money to figure out how to sway people. Like, what string of words do you have to say, or do you have to make people hear to make them do certain physical actions, including going to a voting booth and casting the vote a certain way? So lots of money, lots of attention, lots of resources going into this. But it seems to me more like just an evolutionary process where the institutions that can do this type of stuff outcompete those that can't.
Yes.
Like, right. And so it's at some level simple as. And then I think mass media worked as a beautiful centralized distribution system of messages that could kind of get everyone on the same message, which is very nice. And it was believed in a sort of like very naive way, like whatever's on the 8 o'clock news is what's true. This gives you a lot of power because it means you can change what many people believe at once, and you can arbitrage this. You can make them believe things that are not necessarily true, but that benefit you to believe, or you can make them believe things you want to become true, and you can kind of like do this sort of like hyperstitioning stuff. But ultimately, I think it's just memetic competition, memetic warfare, TV centralizes stuff, internet decentralizes stuff, and now I think everyone is a little bit forced to engage in this. We are and have always been, and here I would call again Gendlin's adage, of like, admitting it doesn't make it worse. Like, this is how things have always been. But we are and have been in a memetic warfare environment where our beliefs, not ours personally, but of whatever reference group class we make part of, are being fought for very, very actively. And the concepts and the words that we have at our disposal are not infrequently given to us so that they lead us into a certain direction of action. Yeah.
This actually fits very nicely with the meditation, spiritual path, because we're already doing a version of this with ourselves, right? Like when we get caught in our thought loops about something, and then that makes us disconnected from reality. And that's already hard enough. But what you're saying is there's that going on in your individual experience. And then there's this whole landscape of like memetic warfare that is also happening at the same time. And we already know how vulnerable we are to believing delusion when it comes to our own lives. And so if someone is banking on you believing delusion because they have some sort of goal for you, then it's much harder to deal with.
Yeah. I think this is right. So I think there's just the general fact of thoughts and believing your thoughts very naively or reflexively. And then there's also, what are the building blocks of your thoughts? What concepts and what words are being used there? What are you thinking about when, why, right? Like why this thought now? Like what sort of media came through Twitter or, your phone or your computer or your TV more generally that triggered a certain thought, and why was that put there, and with what goal, by whom, etc.
It just reminded me of the benefits of coming back to front loading, having an existential crisis earlier on in life.
Yeah. If you're gonna do it, just do it ASAP.
Do it as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Like having your whole world model crumble, and then going through the trauma of that, and then being like, oh, I'm still here. It's okay. Yeah. It gives you a lot more flexibility when you find yourself attaching to different world models and then detaching from them.
There's an old quote by Tiago Forte from Forte Labs, who goes something like, the point is not to avoid cults, but to cycle through them as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And I think effectively at some point, like bodybuilding ideology got to me, then at another point rationalist ideology got to me, and so on. And so the cycle or experience of being owned by an ideology, EA, effective altruism, and seeing the things in its terms, with its concepts, interpreting my experience through them, etc. And that's eventually becoming disillusioned, or it failing me somehow. Build this kind of like facility, which still took 5 years of tweeting maniacally, but build this facility with concepts and this like kind of like skeptical eye towards them, of not just intaking them, especially when they're not a very common word, like when it's not like that, more, less. When you see like this sort of like new construction, useful idiots was one that at some point popped off.
Yeah.
And again, kind of tying back to what we were saying, that maybe this stuff shouldn't be shared, because if it paradoxically, obviously I want your podcast to succeed and I want this episode to be seen by many people, but if this becomes common knowledge, it stops working. But if you go on Google Trends and you put useful idiot, right, it just goes like, right, like it just has this huge inflection point where the message went out or whatever, and everyone started using it, and then you see people start non-ironically using it. You also saw this for Brett. You can find this when the Kamala is Brett meme was trending. So there was
Brat, yeah.
Brett, a very concerted push towards it.
Yes.
And you will find, if you start investigating, that there's a bunch of words that suddenly you start hearing everyone saying.
Yeah.
And then if you go on Google Trends, it goes and it comes, and it was very clearly deployed by someone at some point for some reason, but people are using them very critically. And then at some live long enough in this system critically, and all your concepts, all your thoughts are formed by this sort of like engineered concepts that memetic engineers, for lack of a less cringe description, crafted for some temporary contingent memetic goal that they have.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to think and to make decisions and to live a good life if that's all the tools that you have.
Yeah.
Because they were not built for that.
Yeah, I want to see if we can give people a little bit of an intuition for this with maybe a less like loaded, like emotionally loaded case.
Yeah. This is actually very hard, and it's one of the biggest difficulties that I had in writing the book, which is these are deliberately emotionally loaded because that's what splits the population in like kind of like across, which gets you maximum conflict, which gets you maximum engagement, both in the sense of getting people online to view your stuff, which is what you want, attention, or what politicians or political actors often want, and to get them to move to go to the polls, because one thing is you're voting to increase tips by 1% or whatever, and then the other thing is you're voting Hitler out of power, right? One of them is just motivationally much more interesting.
It activates you, yeah.
Exactly. And so they are deliberately crafted to be emotionally engaging, which makes the whole topic anti-memetic, right?
Yeah.
Which then is in this sort of like evolutionary selection thing what protects it, right? Because if it weren't, people could just look at it, get insight into it, and like, oh, okay. But no, but it's protected. There's this ball around it. And so I even thought, when I'm done with the book, to have it online and as a questionnaire that places you politically, etc. in the beginning, and then depending on what you are, you get one set of examples.
Yeah.
And then the hope would be by the end, people would just out of curiosity go see, okay, if I flip it, what kind of examples do I get?
Yeah.
But now they had followed the logic once with the terms that were there, right? And now then the logic was undeniable, like they followed it. And so now, even when emotionally activating terms are used, they can't deny the logic.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I should do it.
Yeah, it's basically it's like a sophisticated red pill that's very like specific to the reader.
Yeah. mRNA peel.
One example that came to mind of finding out whether or not the words you're using are actually speaking to your direct felt sense that isn't political.
Sure.
That might be helpful. And I think I've talked about it before on the podcast is last year when we were in SF, we were at a Whole Foods and we got our like orange juice or whatever. And then I was like kind of lingering and you're like, what's going on? And it's like, because I saw an attractive woman that I was considering chatting up, and you're like, who? You're like I've been in this Whole Foods too. Who are you talking about? We're in SF. And then you're like, oh, I think I know the one. And then you said, let me ask you, like, is she an attractive woman or are you attracted to her?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good question. And like, while I was thinking about it, she just happened to walk by. And she was just like this classically, like traditionally good looking blonde girl with like nice features that I'm supposed to find attractive. Yes. Basically, it's kind of like it was very archetypal, like just like attractive. If you type attractive woman into Google, maybe 10 years ago, let's say, you would see her face or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was just like this perfectly timed kind of pointer, because as soon as you said that, I was in that curious state trying to envision her, and then she walked by,
Mm-hmm.
and then I realized that she's just like technically attractive,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't feeling attracted. Like
Yes. Yes.
I wasn't having this felt sense of being pulled towards her.
Yeah.
Which is what
Attraction is. Yes.
Yeah, that's what it should mean, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a very simple example, but it shows how that word shifted
Mm-hmm.
to not mean what it's supposed to mean,
Mm-hmm.
which is when you're actually drawn to someone.
Yeah.
And now it means like, attractive TM or something, or like.
Yes.
So I wonder if there's like other non-loaded examples of basically if your terminology isn't mapped directly to the thing that's real,
Mm-hmm.
how you can get confused. Because like, just to spell this out, this could be really funny. Like you could go your entire life
Mm-hmm.
dating women that are attractive TM,
Yeah.
but you have no idea what actually attracts you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it's a very silly way to live. But there's other ways that we're doing this all the time, and there's really consequential political ways that this is happening en masse.
Yes. Yes. So I think there's a trade-off here, right? Because the political examples are necessarily more distilled and
Mhm.
higher stakes, but also, as you're saying, a worse pedagogical tool,
Yeah.
right? And then with regards to what you're saying about intellectually judging someone to be attractive versus experiencing the direct experience of being attracted to them, I think is a perfect example, because we're so far from the direct experience that we don't even know what the word references anymore, where what the word actually references, and I think a bunch of people won't be surprised hearing this, but a bunch of people will, is being attracted to someone actually means that you, against your understanding and better judgment, keep finding yourself wherever they are. You're in the same house, you're in a house party, whatever you are, it just so happens that your bodies are always in close vicinity, not because you've made any sort of conscious choice, but it just over and over disappears. And so I think the word attractive matches to a very literal experience of it's like two bodies attracting one another, as if like celestial bodies or whatever, like they just are drawn towards one another. I think the same way that you have that, and I really enjoyed your use of attractive TM to say the social stereotype of what attractive should be and or you should feel attracted to, whether or not you actually do happen to find yourself in the vicinity of that body, and which also is interesting in the sense that it's mainly visual, where I think the actual attraction is not necessarily. I think this happens in a bunch of areas and people get owned, for lack of a better word, in the same way that they get owned by these specific ideologies that might be triggering to reference. I want to be happy TM, and then there's this specific mental image of what that entails
based on commercials that you've seen or something.
And I've heard people who are 60 years old saying, I got all that I wanted, and then only at the end I realized this wasn't it at all.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a life wasted. And I think for basically everything, if you're not very careful about finding in your experience what precisely the word matches to, or what is the experience that is being pointed at by the word, you will instead get this social simulacrum of what it should be, right? Or how it should be seen, or how it should be felt, etc., etc. Precisely as you say, focusing is a tool that brings you back to yourself and grounds yourself and helps you to connect to what are your values, what you actually want, what you actually need, and get away from these concepts that other people crafted for you for some reason.
We'll come back to the Psyops, but just in case people are wondering, what's like a quick way someone could actually do focusing?
So I think the best way to get started with it is by going on the focusing website. They have a website. They have something they call focusing partnerships. People are more than willing to guide you. There's also the focusing book that gives 6-step instructions. It's basically, and it works especially well, or at least it's easier if you have an ongoing problem, tension, like something unsorted in your life, and you can just stop for a moment and breathe and check in with what's going on in the center of your body. And it will very often be the case that there's something there. There's some sense, some pressure, some tension. For me, it's more on the left-hand side. But there's something there. You don't know what it is, but you can feel in your phenomenal body, or whatever you want to call it. There's a thing there that you can feel into, similarly to when you're experiencing the tip of tongue phenomena. There's something that you can feel into, even if you don't have the right word for it yet. It's at the edge of your internal bodily sense. And if you lock into it and get there, you can start asking questions about it. Is it like, does it have a shape? Does it have a color? Does it remind you of something? If it had a smell, what would be the smell? Like, you can just kind of find these emotional associations or experiential associations, and then you can start to put words to it, like very slowly, very gently, because it seems, and this is just the experience, and I'm personifying it, but it shouldn't be understood to be an agent in any way, that it reacts to the words that you use. Like, it will actively reject some words.
Yeah.
And it will, and some others feel like they fit more, but it will be very obvious when it's the right word, because there will just be this lock and key dynamic, and it opens, it releases, and then sometimes it's a strange word, you don't know what it means, but you keep pulling from it, and especially it helps to do it how I'm doing it now, right, where I'm telling someone else about it.
Yeah.
And you're just going in there, you get it out, the person's like, oh, so is it like this? And then you go back in and you're like, well, it's not exactly that, but it's kinda, sorta, etc. And there's lots of kinda and sorta, because I think it cuts across the concepts that we have. It has its own logic that then, by being symbolized, will revamp the current concepts that you have and the current ordering and logic. But you keep doing that, and at the end, usually you get a determinate sentence. It's like, oh, I know, it's blah, and then you say that, and that's it, and that sentence grabs onto or accurately reflects what that felt sense was about, or what it meant, or was trying to communicate.
There's two things that are happening there that relate very directly to inoculating yourself against Psyops.
Yeah.
The first is it requires a certain threshold of bodily awareness to even be able to tune into your felt sense and be like, oh, there's something going on in the left of my stomach or whatever. And if you don't have that, then it's much easier for somebody to infect you with concepts that have no connection to your experience. Right. So the body awareness is actually connecting you to your experience, to reality. So that's one. And then the other is you are just simply putting things in your own words.
Yes.
Not somebody else's. And if you do it in somebody else's words, you're not necessarily going to get that lock and key thing.
Yeah.
So to me, it kind of seems like if somebody's practicing focusing quite regularly, they will at least develop some kind of defense against these concepts that are basically unmooring you from reality.
Yeah, that's I hadn't thought about that, actually.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I knew I came here for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think there's a type of thinking that you often see with people who aren't doing this, where they just have a bunch of words that they got from the outside, and they're like, oh, this word is like that other word. And you're like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. But it's very superficial and at the level of superficial analogy, and it's very different from the actual felt experience of, oh, there's a thing here and I need to get it out. And maybe I need to make up new words for it. Or maybe there's no words for it yet. Like maybe it's at the edge of what has been thought thus far, either by me or by humanity. Like I think Gendlin would say when theorists, like scientists, are theorizing, are like trying to make sense of new observations, it comes primarily from here. The understanding is here, and then it's put into words, symbolized, mathematized, all of that. But it's felt bodily.
Yeah.
Like he would say the body knows philosophy, and that's where it comes from. You go beyond, the body can go beyond what you can say as of now, given the tools that you have, the logical tools that you have. But it will revamp your logic, right? Like we start with way back in the day with classical logic, and now you have all sorts of like many valued logics and fuzzy logics, paradoxical consistent logics, paraconsistent logics, etc. Right? So each time it was found that the analytical tool that we had or that we got from the outside found its limits when being applied, bodily found its limits, and then that got articulated by someone by a group of people over time.
Yeah, the thing that's coming to mind is this idea of bounded rationality.
Yeah.
Where I guess like a very simple example is if you're in a state of rage, then that creates a bound, an emotional bound on the types of thoughts you're going to have. And so if you have an argument with someone while you're angry, you're going to remember all the other times you were angry. You're going to discount some evidence that makes them seem like a better person than you actually feel like they are in this moment. And then all your logic and your propositional thinking is going to be constrained by your anger. And another way to say that is there's constraints, there's like bodily constraints to your thoughts.
Yeah.
And if you develop a dialogue with your body, if you develop a dialogue with your emotions, if you like factor them in or explore like that frontier, then it almost seems like the bounds start to open. You know, the thing shifts in your body, and then like all of a sudden it's like, the problem's solved.
Yeah.
Like an example of this is if you're having a lot of black and white thinking, it's like either A or B.
Yeah.
That's usually a sign that you're in this like bounded state where there's an emotion that's being resisted. There's some focusing that wants to be done that is constraining the way you think about a problem space, because usually there's so many more options than just A and B.
Yeah, I think this is directionally correct. I think that it speaks to something like, again, naively believing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Without this sort of like, meta tracking awareness of where your bodily state is, right? Isn't ideal in the sense that you can be angry, or you can be sad, or you can be grieving, or you're just tired, or you're low resource, etc., which will always put a spin on your thoughts because you are, a biological entity. And those ultimately are subordinate to what's happening with your biology and your physiology. It's just hard, I think, and I think it takes time. I think it takes a long time. I think it's a difficult insight to have. I think it's, in my experience, it's something, at least maybe I'm a slow learner, but it's something that I needed to be hit with over and over again of like, everything's bad. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm hungry. Like whatever, right?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of those where you will be able to correctly identify them. It's like, oh, my belly is rumbling. Oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. Or I'm having this thought about this problem that I have. It's like, oh, okay, I actually do need to act on that. Like that's an important part of my life that's not being taken care of. But then the ones that you can correctly identify, you'll just solve, right?
Yeah.
Like in analogy to not Vasco's knife, the ones that remain are the ones that you usually misclassify.
There's a selection effect.
Yeah, where you're misclassifying something that's physical as something that's mental, or vice versa, and so you're trying to solve it with the wrong tool.
Yeah. I remember you once were telling me the difference between having an emotion as like content in conscious experience versus like being emotional, or like reality is sad as opposed to I have sadness.
Yeah.
That also seems like a quirk of language. Like I'm sure there's some languages that just the way that you describe your emotions creates some distance with them. Like you say I have sadness instead of I am sad. And then that just, now you just see it as something that might be passing through you as opposed to something that's characteristic of experience.
Yeah. There's a guy called Locke Kelly that I like a lot, who does what he calls Brooklyn Mahamudra, because he's in New York. And then Mahamudra is just a tradition of Buddhism where they try to directly point you to experience. And so he has a bunch of exercises. But one of them that he has, as you're saying, to work with emotions is going from saying, I'm sad, to I feel sad, to I feel sadness, to I am aware of feeling sadness. And if you really set your mind to this, you can see your experience like gaining distance, gaining context, gaining perspective.
Yeah.
Right? You're not locked into that state, but you're like, oh, okay, this is a thing that's happening, but there's also everything else.
Yeah. So you made this gesture a couple times, like, so on the journey retreat, when you stepped outside the threshold and then the ceiling was gone, and then all of a sudden you had like more expanded awareness.
Yes.
And then you had something that pulled you back in.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a second.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you went all the way back.
Yeah.
That's how it feels for me too. It's like when you switch to identifying with awareness itself as opposed to something within your experience, like it feels like you're moving along the Z-axis or something.
Yes.
Further back. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, I think that's how it feels. I think the default or something is to feel like you're somewhere behind your eyes.
Yeah.
And you're like just, like this, I think is how much you would see usually. But I do think that there's all of these experiences where you your awareness just opens. I think you literally see more. Also.
Yeah.
And it just does feel like this. A similar maybe experience to grasp it is what it feels like to be at top of a mountain. I think when you're at top of the mountain, I think the reason people seek being at top of the mountain is because at the top of the mountain, there's nothing in your visual field and your awareness just like blasts open and it feels amazing. But you can just have that all the time. And the experience is very much, you're going back and it's opening up. So you go from being like this, so you don't see really above you kinda to the sides, and then suddenly there's all of these like expanse. Another way of saying it, so one way that you can say it is you're opening awareness. Another way you can say it is you're dropping mental tension and mental resistance. And that resistance is this like constraint or this like felt ceiling or these like felt walls that are near you, which feel real. They feel like the boundary of reality while they're there. But then you notice, oh, this can actually fall away.
Yeah.
It feels way better.
Yeah. This reminds me of the cold shower thing.
Yes.
You know, and like bracing versus embracing, right? I remember hearing a prompt to like take a cold shower and then just imagine the cold is like going through you. So it's like you're making your body transparent to it or something. And that prompt worked really well for me.
Yeah, it's very much the same thing. So the expansion of awareness and the dropping of resistance, be it resistance to the fear of the cold of the shower or the pain that would come with it, or dropping mental tension or dropping mental these are all pointing at the same experience.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, first it's tense and it's small, and then you release and you open.
Yeah.
It feels really good.
I think this also explains why people have stuck emotions, because stuck emotions are basically you're resisting an emotional reality. And then part of the reason why it's so tricky to even talk about, let alone practice, is that if somebody tells you, hey, you have stuck emotions, if you stop resisting them, your life will improve, then people will cash that out as, I need to stop resisting my emotions, which in itself is another resistance move. Now you're like resisting the resistance. I think once you get to your 30s, there's a few things about your behavioral patterns or personality that are just, they persist because they're like a tough class of problem. Like they have these weird kind of self-referencing, self-reinforcing components to them. Or like the tools that you use to succeed up until now for a few decades are the very tools that are like now the obstacles to get to the next stage. And I think this resistance thing is one of them. I don't know how much you agree with this, but I always like the Trojan horse love. To me, love is the word, like, you know, coming back to what's the felt sense of that. That's a word that people use all over the map. But at least the way I'm using it now, the felt sense of love is something like a state of like deep welcoming of like non-resistance. And so if there is something in your experience that you're resisting, like let's say there's some open loop about some task that you didn't do and there's some consequence associated with it, and you're just like, oh fuck, I don't really want to deal with that right now, and then you're pushing it away. Instead of like removing the resistance, the opposite move is like, can I love the feeling of whatever that is right now? And it might just be resistance right now. The first layer might just be like procrastination, like I don't want to do this thing. And instead of being like, I need to stop procrastinating, which is just going to perpetuate some type of resistance, it's like, can I deeply welcome, can I be friendly with the feeling of procrastination? Practically, one thing that's worked for me is, and I think I saw this on Twitter, is just notice if you're doing something that you don't like to do, or you're avoiding or whatever. Just tune into how much body tension you're creating while doing it. And often it's like there's this unconscious way in which you brace. Like this came up on the Romeo Stevens podcast, I think, where I noticed that every time I'd access one of my banks, their website was so slow and sluggish that like as soon as I'd see the page loading, and like I'd feel this like physical tension in my body. And that was the bank account that I just wouldn't do as much bookkeeping with because their website was so slow. And so there's like a physical resistance that I'm adding there, and then it's making me think I don't want to deal with my finances there or something. But it's some other thing that I added to it.
This makes a lot of sense to me. I think the word "not" in natural language is very ambiguous and gets ambiguously interpreted. Like, so going from concepts to actual experience. And when people say don't resist or stop resisting, do not resist, what they're trying to say is, you are doing resistance right now, just drop it. So don't you see how hard it is,
hard,
right?
It's hard.
Don't continue doing the resistance that you're doing.
Yeah.
But what it gets interpreted is, in addition to what you're doing, also start doing this move, which is not resisting, right? So you're just piling stuff on.
Yeah.
And then, precisely as you said, that can loop and go into infinity. Like, there's an action, a task, a feeling, whatever, you're resisting it, and now you're resisting the resistance, and now you're hearing this, and now you're resisting the resistance of the resistance, and this can just go on forever. Or you can invert the thing, precisely as you said, with love or with acceptance, which is, okay, there's resistance. Let's look at it. Let's chill. Let's welcome. Let's enjoy it. Let's surf it. And then this is the way to go down, all the way back, down the stack, until you're actually, experiencing or feeling whatever wants to be or needs to be experienced or feeling. And then you'll be shocked to discover that once you do, it goes away. This thing that you were fearing for maybe your whole life, this sentiment that you were fearing maybe once after being felt for a few seconds, just drops and then is never there.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
That's such an important point, because in my experience, like in the last couple of years, some of the more transformative things that took place in my life and in my personality, when I actually experienced them, they weren't like this big, like massive moment where it's like, oh, then I remembered some trauma from when I was a kid and I had this like montage playing in my mind and this flashback, and then I just cried for 2 hours. I'm sure stuff like that happens, but for me, it's like right adjacent to your awareness at all times. And it's kind of familiar, actually. And you're just, for whatever reason, there's momentum with like not attending to it. And something happens, you have the right coach, or you read the right book, or listen to the right podcast or whatever, and it changes the way you relate to it. And you're like, oh, that thing? And then you just drop it. And then all of a sudden that side of the map opens up. And it's almost embarrassing. At how much suffering you were causing yourself for like a decade. Because you weren't willing to poke that paper tiger. Something I heard about this that I thought was really helpful is, if you're really comfortable with the emotion of grief, that will speed up this journey a lot. Because one of the reasons why people don't take the easy wins is because doing so means that you wasted so much time, and there's something to grieve there. You're like, I could have done this, like that instant move that I just did right now. I could have done it 15 years ago. This kind of reminds me of something we talked about before, where people say big if true. It's also true if big. And so if you make something really big, like it must be true. And it also, it starts to have its own kind of momentum to it. So it'll be very hard for you to believe that you literally could solve this thing in like a 5-minute honest conversation with yourself. You don't need like 10 years of ayahuasca retreats and like $30,000 worth of like coaching and therapy or whatever. Like it could literally be that simple.
Speaking of Romeo Stevens, I do remember him saying something like, it's very hard to estimate how big something is without actually wading into it. But then wading into it is the thing that you fear. And so your error bars for how big it could be are like, in the limit, it could be really, really large. But my experience matches yours, which is, it's shocking how often it's not, as you said, this big insight with lots of crying and this montage and so on. And it's just like, and that's it. And you were fearing this, for 12 years or something. And then just this on repeat. I think it's a hard lesson to learn, but I also think it's very worth it.
And just a couple optimistic and practical things. I think when you have a couple of those, it starts developing its own momentum. Like it's not like this confusing thing for your whole life. I think once you start to see there's a different way of being, there's like, you take steps back in that Z axis we were talking about. You identify more as the witness of your experience as opposed to the experience itself. Like these things start to flow, and it's not nearly as complex and effortful as it might seem at the outset. The other thing that came up is on your little riff about the word not being confusing. A word that I like is release. Instead of saying like stop resisting or don't do this, if you just like the word release seems to, at least for me, convey something that's closer to this. It's like it really is a letting go of something that you're doing. Or I remember Jeff Warren, my meditation teacher, once said he realized like he'd been holding a fist for like 20 years. And then it's just like, oh, what? Like that kind of doesn't feel good. And then once he became aware of the fist, it just all I had to do was just stop doing that. Release the fist. This came up in my conversation with Daniel Thorson, but this can be confusing for people. There's so many different ways to approach it. Like, do I start feeling my feelings? Do I like learn about the Fetters? Do I go to a journey retreat? Do I need to meditate an hour a day? Do I need to do the crazy shit that Vashko's done? One thing that I found very clarifying and helpful is that across all these different healing modalities, transformational experiences, the thing that seems to be a necessary ingredient and potentially sufficient is just a high degree of safety. And so if you can create an environment, a dynamic, like anything that creates tons of safety for the nervous system, then you'll be willing to wade into the big thing with the massive error bars, because you're like, it might feel like death, but you're like, everything else in my system feels safe right now. And I think the thing that interpersonally creates a ton of safety is when you feel loved. You know, if you're talking to someone and you're actually like feeling like this person loves me, they're deeply welcoming everything here. They're not going to judge me. You know, I can bring the scary, ugly parts of myself to this conversation, and this person is still going to accept me. And then they give you evidence for that. Then all of a sudden you start to like, you know, let go of your fist a little bit. Yeah.
One of the greatest things that I've taken from our friendship is your capacity to just stay still and then reactive as I shared things that could be shameful, right? So it's sort of like the improved version of sharing them on Twitter, and then having like random accounts, you know, half hating me and half being like, this is great. It's just saying them out loud in a space to someone, or where there's someone who's not necessarily having even any sort of reaction, negative or positive, but it's just like, you know, sitting there with you and letting you speak out loud and, you know, do focusing out loud and letting your thoughts breathe. And that has been really, really helpful actually, and really, I don't want to say healing because that's gay. But but it's been great. So yeah, thank you for that. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, you got it.
The example of the mom and the kid, and a mouse runs across the kitchen floor, and the kid like doesn't know how to, like, what's a mouse? Like, the kid doesn't really know how to react to it. And so if the mom is like, oh, a cute little mouse, the kid will be fine. But if the mom like freaks out and jumps on the table and starts grabbing the broom, then the kid's going to start crying. And I think that's like an extreme version of it. I'm your mom. You're the, no, I think
you're the rat. Yeah, sure. I'm the rat? No, I'm not sure. I got confused.
I think we do this all the time with one another.
Yeah.
And so you could find yourself like surrounded by people who just freak out at everything. Yeah. And then you're like, all right, I guess this is serious. This is big. I got to freak out.
Yeah.
Or you have friends who are non-reactive and accepting and deeply welcome whatever the hell's going on. And then that's what allows it to make that little insight move where you go past that thin layer of resistance that you've had for your whole life. And you're like, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah, I very much think sunlight is the best disinfectant. So just allowing things to be said out loud changes something as per focusing, and as you can verify in your own experience. And yeah, I think you can get over-indexed, especially as you're a child. So there's, you know, not only the hyperpriors or the feathers, but there's all of these just experiential conditioning. And it just so happens that whoever you happen to grow up with, like, you know, your parents, your core family, had their own things going on, and unwittingly trained you to be a certain way and to read the world a certain way. But I agree with you that there's lots of freedom to be gained by just being around people who merely don't react, or who react less, or who would not mind the mouse, or just, you know, gently move the mouse out of the kitchen instead of immediately crying or screaming or trying to hit it with the broom, or like at least reflexively crying or screaming or hitting it with a broom. And then just the mere presence and being of those people around you gives you more and more degrees of freedom and frees you up. So there's not only the freedom from suffering caused by these like large hyperpriors, but there's also the freedom from this habitual conditioning that was just learned when you were a child, like mouse bath. And, you know, mouse obviously here is a metaphor for anything. And it's just like, mouse,
Yeah. I feel like a common thread in the conversation so far, like something that ties a bunch of things together, is just how malleable we are. Because we said at the outset the thing about how you cannot imagine just how different people's interiority is. You have your own experience of having such a dramatic shift in the way that you suffer, the way that you experience reality, and stuff that I'm sure if you were told would happen to you, you know, 10 years ago, like, you just wouldn't believe it. And then also we live in an environment that this whole like adversarial environment where people are quite easy to manipulate, actually, just by virtue of the fact that we identify with our thoughts.
Yes.
And so the human organism is in a way extremely vulnerable. And how you tune it, the environment that you're in, the practices that you do, like can vastly change the experience of your life, basically.
Yeah, I think this is entirely correct. It goes a little bit back to our conversation about adding slack in the relationship. You can add slack to the global human organism, if you want to call it that, by doing what is and of course, and I want to preface this with the thing that we said earlier, which is like at the limit, validating your emotions is bad. So there's people who definitely you should always hear the opposite of whatever advice you're getting, because if you're the kind of person who's getting that advice, you actually need the opposite, right? Like if all your friends are telling you to go to therapy, you should go to the gym and vice versa, or whatever. But having said that, if you, in my opinion, genuinely and courageously engage in self-improvement, in these healing practices, in gaining space, in being less reactive, then there's a way that this outflows or spreads to people around you, and further. And I think very often people don't have any idea of the way that they're affecting others just by being themselves. And I don't mean by doing something, so I'm doing this so that, no, just by you being who you are. I remember being, I must have been younger than 15, like 14, let's say, in English class. And I was making fun of Asian kids.
As one does.
Of course, because I was young, because they ate with chopsticks, and chopsticks were weird for me. And then my teacher just made this like, kind of like offhand comment where she said, oh, maybe they think it's weird that you put metal inside your mouth. And I was just like, just blew my mind, right? Like just like, whoa, like that was the most valuable thing she taught me, because I gained this sense of like, I popped off from the frame that I was in, and I was like, oh, okay, now I can see that there's at least two ways of doing things or seeing things here. And that just to exemplify that just being yourself has a huge impact. It spreads out, like this is, the idea of karma kind of, or like another way to think about it is traffic, right? Like if you just make one dangerous maneuver that makes someone behind you brake, then that makes someone behind them brake, and then it goes all the way.
Yeah. If
you're driving very smoothly, and obviously it's a metaphor for life, then everyone else gets the affordance to drive very smoothly. So in so fact as you do these practices enabling you yourself to go in a smoother way through life, you're actually enabling everyone who's interacting with you directly or indirectly to also go in a smoother way through life.
Yeah. It's very optimistic.
I'm an optimistic guy.
Let's go back to the dark side.
Couldn't let me have it for a second, please.
Yeah. I should have waited like 2 seconds for it. There's much more to say about your book. You know what's funny? You told me this thing of how you read books using LLMs. You paste you put the PDF into the LLM, and then you ask it to summarize it at different levels of abstraction and simplicity. So at first it's like, okay, summarize this book in one word, summarize it in one sentence, summarize it in an abstract, and then you get like a bigger and bigger gestalt until you have like a map to hang all the concepts on. And maybe you know this already, but guess what word it used to summarize your book?
I have no idea.
It's very funny. I was going to send you a screenshot. It's like, summarize Vashko's book in one word, and it said confusion.
Well, did you read the preface?
A long time ago, I think.
Okay.
It's not at hand.
So in my defense, a big theme of the book is that I say that the book traces the history of my confusion and is the process of deconfusing myself. So there's plausible deniability that it's not that it thought that the book was confused itself, just that it dealt with the theme of confusion and clearing it up.
No, well, yeah, that's clearly what it's about. I think the part of it that I want to speak to a bit is this idea that we live in a time where we're very polarized, and everybody has different maps of making sense of reality, which are all to varying degrees unmoored from reality, given what we talked about. And having alignment across all these maps is of utmost importance. You know, there's all the meta crisis, there's all these ways in which it seems like we're not able to coordinate, and all the biggest problems that we're faced with involve human coordination. And at the time where we need coordination the most, we seem to have it the least. And a lot of this has to do with the adversarial epistemology, the memetic warfare, the like creating separate camps where people have totally different maps of reality, and then they're not even able to model one another. Yeah. And that's almost, not even almost, that's by design in a way. I think that's what you're calling hyperreality. Is that correct?
So basically, you know, we've talked a little bit about concepts, how concepts can be confusing, etc. Words. The book traces the history of my confusion, that not only did I feel generally confused, I couldn't get to agreement with a bunch of people, and not just like we disagree on these propositions, but we're using words differently and concepts in a different way, and like it feels like there's no way to bridge this gap. Like there's no way that I'm going to get from where I am to where they am, or like we're not going to meet. Like there's not going to be a meeting of minds here. And I just started looking into this increasingly, and I think there's a bunch of things going on. I think one of the things that's going on is that historically, you have the need to align people pretty early on. Who are we? What are we doing here? Like, how do things work, etc. Like, you're in a very bad situation if your civilization just became a farmer civilization, and you can't get people to actually farm. Like, you're just gonna die. There needs to be some way that they can be convinced that farming is very important, other than the direct material need that maybe will come X amount of time into the future.
Is this the same thing as why we need kings?
Yeah. So in this case, priests, but I'm going to go into this. But yes. So basically, God wills that you tile your earth in this specific way, right? And it is known that in mass communication, you can't have nuance because it will just get lost, right? And so you just need to have a very simple message. And God wills that X is a simpler kind of message than, well, if we don't do this, then we're not going to have crops when the flood maybe comes, and then we're going to die because there's not enough to go around, since et cetera, right? And so you just kind of like find this sort of like
compression,
and lindy things that work over time for a particular civilization. And then where it gets interesting is that sometimes there's no one right way of going about something, right? Like driving left or driving right, like none of them is really superior. Well, both of them are superior to not having any rule, right? Like if everyone can just drive any one way, then you're all going to hit one another's car, or we're all going to hit one another's car, and no one is going to make it home. And then if you just get everyone to exclusively drive right or to exclusively drive left, then everyone, forsake a little bit of liberty, but now we all go the right way. And why do we do this? Well, because the king wills it, and the king is the king, and he's a good king, and etc. Right? So you need to have someone who sets up this sort of map for everyone. As the size of your group, tribe, whatever you identify with, expands, this sort of like large coordination problems, which is what these are, like you have two solutions that work, but you need everyone to be in one of them for it to work for everyone, expand and get more difficult. And so do the structures that kind of like deliver these coordination technologies. So you can look into law as a coordination technology. You can look into religion as a coordination technology. Like who I am, what do I do? Like how is my life organized? And you get increasingly complex coordination technologies, right? At some point you have the church, the Christian church in Europe, that has this central repository of dogma with the 10 rules, thou shalt not, etc., plus all these other things, various sins, etc. And that has this sort of like distribution mechanism where they have priests everywhere, that every Sunday at least are giving you mass and do this, don't do that, and are kind of like coordinating everyone to make sure that everyone is driving left or driving right, as the case may be. When this breaks in the 1500s with the printing press, if I'm not mistaken, you get the European wars of religion, and for 100 years everyone in Europe is killing one another, and you don't get a sort of like centralized coordination technology for a while. Like the next time that you get it is television, which once again, going back to the 8 o'clock evening news, it actually worked that everyone believed it, because now we can all coordinate ourselves in the same direction, especially in the context of a mass society. At the same time, you also had mass democracy, and with this the post system, where you basically have two big parties, and then there's this big fight where one wants to align at least 51% of people who will vote to see things a certain way that will drive them to vote a certain way, and the other one wants to align them in another direction.
Yeah.
This got more complex as our main centralization technology got unbundled, first by having various channels, and then eventually by having the internet, where now everyone can test their own means and their own coordination technology. But basically it's just, you have a group of people, you have a bunch of coordination problems. If everyone is coordinated any one way, everyone is better. There's conflict because some people benefit from people being coordinated one way, some people benefit from people being coordinated another way. And then this has been like a sort of like, I would say, global ratcheting up process, where it has been discovered, or in this sort of evolutionary way, that the thing that actually works is to have people live in a sort of hyperreality, to have people live in a simulacrum that doesn't necessarily couple very well to reality, but that scales very well. And it scales so nicely that at least most people in the Western world live there. And that place, that simulacrum, is what I describe as Hyperamericana, where you have people all over the world dealing with and living very intensely the same American political subjects that Americans live, when they have no material relationship to their actual lived reality, except as allowing them to be parts of these debates.
Like, having BLM protests in Scandinavia or something.
Precisely. There's a very, BLM protests are a great example. They happened in Portugal. Portugal was, at the time, I don't know if it still is, one of the countries in the world with the least amounts of political violence. So there was kind of nothing to protest. And there's a very fun image where there's a bunch of girls who happen to be white protesting in the face of a bunch of policemen who happen to be black. And it just shows.
From Portugal?
Yes. And it just shows the way that, that they're living in a sort of reality that doesn't very directly map onto this, but that allows you to hack their motivational system to have them work in the way that you want. And then I think what actually happened was, this is primarily an American thing, but making propaganda is hard, and making scaled up propaganda is expensive and takes resources. And it's much easier to have people already live in this like American hyper reality and then bring them there and bring the fight there than to actually create your own, Portuguese propaganda or whatever. So you just bring them there and then you fight things on that level, and you just mimic whatever is the American topic of the moment. This is exactly what has been happening, at least in Portugal.
So it's easier to just piggyback on the fight that's already taking place. Yeah,
precisely. And I think this is what scaled the mechanism, at least across the West.
Yeah. So basically, as a result of decentralizing forces, technology, globalization, coordination became harder and harder. People don't trust the 8 o'clock news anymore. Globalization itself is like there's so much more like geographical contexts that are now pretending to like live in the same world, even though it's the geography is different. That creates an incentive for like basically whichever memetic wizard is the most powerful will get the most mind share. And then to the extent that you do that, you make people live in this hyper reality that is not connected to their actual lived experience, their felt sense. And America is like the frontier or the best at that, or
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you want to coordinate society. There's disagreement about how to coordinate, what to coordinate for, in which direction. There's two main opposing camps. The way that they solve this disagreement is by trying to coordinate people that they can in their way. Part of that is to make them believe various things about the other side. Easiest way is to have them live in a kind of virtual reality, so to speak, where the other side is Hitler or the other side is whatever. Hacks their motivation system. And then it just so happened that that propaganda was so good that it was cheaper for other countries that could speak English, and even if they couldn't, to have it translated or be brought into those like wedgy cultural war type issues. But then make everything very confusing, because people are protesting very loudly in countries about issues that they don't have in the least. BLM is a great example because it just took over Europe in an absolute, like a firestorm. I remember having friends of mine, black friends, that were being harassed because they were not changing their profile picture on Instagram to a black square or whatever it was. And it had very little. Portugal has problems. This is not one of the problems. Political violence is not one of the problems that Portugal has.
Yeah.
And it just drags you away from the actual lived material experiential reality, right? And in a kind of parallel way, that in your personal life, not having your own concepts, your own understanding, drags you away from reaching the person that you're attracted to instead of an attractive person.
Right.
It leads your country towards having this sort of like virtual Pyrrhic victories where we have vanquished policial violence that we never had in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. It's very schizophrenia inducing, even, I would say.
Yeah, I love the way you put that. It kind of highlights the absurdity of it.
Yes, it's very yes. It's an absurd situation. It's an extremely confusing situation, which makes sense of why everyone is confused and mad. I think, right? It's like the two main things. Well, you're mad because you being mad is instrumental to getting you to make moves that might make the people in power gain more power, or at least make the other ones that they don't like lose one of the camps. And then confused because we're doing all of this in this sort of like hyper reality that has little connection to the actual material conditions of our life.
Yeah. This isn't a direct example, but one thing that comes to mind is during COVID, the like cartoon accounting of this complex situation created a dividing line between people who are willing to get vaccinated and anti-vaxxers. And it was expedient to, someone could even make the argument that this was like health officials decided to do this because they thought it was the right thing. But it was expedient to label people who had qualms about taking this novel mRNA substance, which
this is going to take your reach.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. We'll cut this part out. To make them to demonize them, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we have some really funny examples in Canada about Trudeau, like basically calling people who didn't get vaccinated, like associating them with like racism and a bunch of other isms that are bad. And then I heard this anecdote just 2 weeks ago where a friend of mine was telling me how he got like one vaccine, but then started reading into it and then was like, you know what, like I'm a healthy guy. I don't think I want to get the second one. And then his best friend had this meme, this idea that anybody who isn't complying is basically killing grandma. Like it's like it's like that extreme. It's kind of like the enemy is Hitler. Like that's a much more effective meme to get people on a certain side than like, oh, there's a lot of nuance here. Like maybe for some people it's good to get vaccinated. Maybe for younger people, it's like the risks, the cost benefit isn't there, whatever. And that was his best friend, and they got into conflict, and they're not friends anymore.
Right.
Like he lost his best friend. And I remember thinking about this, being like, first of all, that's tragic. But in the way it relates to this, it's like you have your reality of like someone you love, someone who's your best friend. And it's clashing with this hyper reality of anyone who does X is bad. Yeah. In not just a little bit bad, just like evil. The worst. Right? Yeah. We're going to use the word evil or like similar signifiers. And so based on this logic, if I condone this person, then I'm morally culpable or whatever the like unpleasant feelings are that the friend doesn't want to experience. So I'm not going to be friends with this person anymore. So you undermine one of the deepest aspects of your reality, your relationships, your friendships, in service of this hyper-reality.
Yeah. There's that story, well, I don't know if it's a story, but there's a doubt that people usually have, which is like, how could Nazism happen?
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
like, how did normal people turn into this? And in my short, relatively short time on Earth, in Portugal, where I'm from, I've witnessed in about 10 years, people shifting in general or en masse from being extremely homophobic to being extremely homophilic, which confused me a lot. I was like, wait, you all thought like gay people were really bad, and now you all think they're great, but what changed? What was in between that? And that was one of them. The second one is the one that you mentioned, and then more recently, with the Ukraine situation. Roughly, the Russian people that we had were economic migrants that would work sort of like lower wage jobs, but were diligent, orderly, polite, tried to integrate, and so people had a generally high view of them. And I think it took maybe a week between the moment that the war started and the media blitz against Russia started to Russian people being made to feel uncomfortable in public for being Russian.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think there's this unfortunately deep undercurrent that looks for valid social reasons to be cruel to someone, and it wants to find an outlet. And I think that the media has enormous and I think scary amounts of power in being able to basically demonize and ostracize any one group. And it works because people are in this hyper reality where they will subordinate their lived material experience to these concepts that they're getting from the outside, right? Because your friend, it could have gone both ways, right? It's like, only evil people do this, and my best friend did it, therefore my best friend is evil. Or, only evil people do this, but my best friend did it, so it's not only evil people to do it. Maybe some people who do it are not evil, right? And then that would trigger some self-reflection process. And unfortunately, it seems like this person chose to stay in hyper reality. And going back to your grief comment, I think the exiting it can be very painful, both at the level of your social relationships, because now you're not in the same place anymore, but both in what you have to admit has happened. And there's a very big, I think, need for belonging or something, right?
Yes.
That people get from watching the whatever is the current viral TV show, like Game of Thrones or whatever, right? Like we're all in this together and we're all watching it together, or Netflix with the Queen's Gambit, or with Formula One, but which then also gives this media the power to reshape society in very strong ways.
Yeah.
Both making us all, at least in Portugal, like chess, just like from one day to another, everyone was playing chess. From one day to another, everyone started watching Formula One. The same way that from one day to another, everyone hated anti-vaxxers or everyone hated Russians. Yeah, and I think that's the power of hyper-reality and why it's so important to for some actors to take hold of it.
Leaving hyper-reality is scary.
Yeah.
Because it's often lonely.
Yes.
Let's take any example, but the example of this person who left his friend. It's not just resolving like a logical tension. It's like, now I'm going to have a big argument with my girlfriend.
Sure.
And my parents.
Yeah.
And all my friends are going to be mad at me. And like, there's all that. And then there's this one guy. And you know what? The last time we hung out, like he was a little bit mean to me with whatever. And then you just it's easier to scapegoat that one person.
Yeah.
And so given that the situation is often like that, what's like a loving way to invite somebody out of hyperreality?
Give them my book. No, I'm joking. I don't know. It's not obvious to me that it's important to do it at scale. I kind of don't want to speak in a harsh way, but historically, politically, it seems that what most people think doesn't matter. Right? It's just not relevant.
Right.
It matters what a few elites think, and then they tell people what to think. Now, maybe you buy into democracy and like really buy into it, and you think like, no, people should like have a say, and then we should hear their opinion and all of that and so on. Insofar as you buy into that, it makes sense if their opinion is uncorrelated in its errors, such that they cancel out. If they're all getting their opinion from the same one place, then if that opinion is biased, now they're all biased in the same direction, it just multiplies. If you were doing that, if you were that type of person that might have interest in that, I think that's a great research project, and I encourage you to do it. But I actually have no idea how you'd go about it, unless, or rather, the only way I can see it, or that springs to mind immediately, is in this sort of interaction.
Yeah,
where you're with someone that you really, really trust, and like that you, really, really love. And I guess ultimately believe that it's better for them than the current setup, and not just better for you, or at least better for the dyad or something, and then just invite them. I haven't tried to actively do that to anyone that didn't by themselves become attracted to the topic or come to me because they were attracted to me. I think in the same way that I spoke before, just by being myself and sometimes expressing the opinions, I opened up the possibility for some people who then investigated and then come to their own conclusions, like, yo, by the way, like, thank you for that. But I haven't taken any sort of like active steps, and I would be cautious about it. Yeah.
I think that the only thing that comes to mind is Pashko's knife, of course.
I thought you were going to say love.
No, I was. Well,
Pashko's knife and Daniel's love.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of fits. I think part of the reason why it's really hard.
Can't believe you're memeing this into reality. Sorry. So annoying.
Part of the reason why it's really hard is like it hurts, right? It hurts for people to call you evil.
Yes.
When you're just sincerely trying to make sense of the world. And so, you're getting stabbed. Mm-hmm. And when you're hurt and unseen, that's a difficult place to make the other person feel seen and not judged, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can create a little bit more non-reactivity there, a little bit more buffer, a little bit more compassion, be like, you know what, this person's just trying their best, and maybe they're a little bit confused, maybe their social group is a little more homogenous than mine or something like that, then you might do all the things we've been talking about for the last couple hours. Yeah. Which is give people the space to choose otherwise, to make a different move, to expand their awareness. Yeah.
I mean, I was joking, but I actually do believe that's a huge labor of love. It's a huge investment in someone, or at least in taking hold of your own reactions, so that you give them space, to go through theirs, and then maybe build the bridge that they're trying to detonate, maybe not for the best of reasons. Yeah.
What's the title of the book?
The title of the book is Alignment Gone Strange.
Why that title?
Because that's like ultimately, I think, the reason that everyone is mad and confused, which is we have some way of aligning people, mostly worked, but now we have decentralized the means of alignment, which means that everyone is like kind of fighting for them and fighting to, capture different chunks of the population in this like hyper real context where things are not materially connected to our lives, or at least these ideas or ideologies or beliefs that we're all fighting and throwing at one another, which just makes the connection to reality be very perilous and fragile, and so creates this sort of like absurd situations like the one that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where can people get it?
Gumroad.com/NoSilverV.
Pashko, you're one of my favorite people. I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the listeners with?
My only thing was exactly that. Like, buy my book at Gumroad.com/NoSilverV. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow me on my socials at Twitter, NoSilverV.
Hey, this is Daniel Kazandjian. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, you might enjoy my essays on Substack. And if you're a founder or operator who wants to lead with courage and conviction, check out my coaching practice at themetagame.org.